on TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Ukraine remains in control of the Azot chemical plant in Severodonetsk, where hundreds of civilians are sheltering, according to the region's governor. Russian shelling has caused a huge fire at the plant, where non-stop fighting rages on. The area in eastern Ukraine has become the focal point of Russia's efforts, with most of the city now said to be under control. Tens of thousands of protesters have rallied across the U.S. to call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a number of mass shootings. 19 children and 2 adults were killed at Robb Elementary in Uvalde in Texas on the 24th of May. Just days earlier in Buffalo, New York, another 10 people were killed at a supermarket. U.S. President Joe Biden backed the protest, but the chances of legal change are likely to be quashed by Republicans. Protesters say mass shootings cannot be normalized.
There are kids that are half my age, 10-year-olds, who are being gunned down in cold blood, and their parents are never going to see them again. They're never going to see their kids again. My parents could come to my high school graduation, and they're not going to be able to say the same. And that's really what makes me mad.
The government will bring forward legislation tomorrow that complies with a law to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol that governs trade following Brexit. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said the plans are lawful, but Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said today she couldn't understand how the changes would not breach international law. The government's looking into repealing a legal ban that prevents agency staff filling in for striking workers. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph a potential change in legislation would allow companies to hire temporary workers to cover some roles and prevent disruption. But any intervention would not affect the rail strikes across the country later this month. Transport editor for the Daily Mail, David Churchill, says agency staff will only help to a certain point.
Unfortunately, they won't be able to cover some of the skilled jobs like signalling, train drivers, things like that are quite skilled jobs. And unfortunately, it'll only go so far in limiting the chaos.
Police in the American state of Idaho have arrested 31 members of a white supremacist group and charged them with conspiracy to riot at a private event. Police say they were tipped off by a local resident who had spotted the men with masks and shields getting into a lorry. The men were members of the Patriot Front group. And the Queen now holds another important title, the world's second longest reigning modern monarch. Her Majesty's overtaken a king in Thailand who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. Now time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
This morning across the UK it will be generally fine with scattered showers, mainly in the northwest. For many, though, it will be a dry end to the weekend with sunny spells. Looking at northern Scotland, we can see there are still some scattered showers around, though these will be less frequent than yesterday. Winds will ease throughout the day, but it will still be breezy for a time across northern parts of the UK, especially over any high ground. Now moving southwards to Wales and central parts of England, there'll be some isolated showers this morning, particularly over high ground, though there will be sunny spells too. It's a similar picture for southern England and the Channel Isles, but there'll only be a few showers, mostly for western coasts. Feeling pleasant here in the sunshine. The fine weather continues this afternoon with sunny spells and some showers, mainly in the northwest.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
The biggest issue in Britain right now is the cost of living crisis. Energy bills have become ridiculous. Second biggest issue, extraordinarily, is nobody can define what a woman is.
Well, a very, very good morning to you. The time is 4 minutes past 10. I'm Daisy McAndrew. I will be sitting here in the Talk TV studio talking to you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. And boy, have we got a lot to chew over. Of course, just looking at this morning's newspapers, you can see so many different stories causing outrage, whether or not it's Prince Charles's comments about the Rwanda immigration scheme, sending asylum seekers and migrants to Rwanda. Prince Charles, we know, has apparently said in private he thinks the policy is appalling, and today's papers are full of outraged cabinet ministers and politicians saying he should keep his nose out of politics. But I would love to know your opinion on that. Do you think it's fair enough for somebody who's been in public life for 73 years, the 73-year-old heir to the throne, do you think it's fair enough that he has opinions and should feel free to air them, albeit this one was aired in private and then consequently leaked to the newspapers? You can give me a ring and tell me what you think. I'll be taking calls throughout today's show. The number is 03444991000. Or, of course, you can tweet or text me. My own Twitter handle is @Daisy McAndrew, or you can tweet the whole team here at Talk TV Towers, and that Twitter handle is @TalkTV. Or, of course, you can text on 87222. Just put the word talk at the beginning of your text so we know it's for us. So tell me what you think of Prince Charles getting involved in political issues. It's something he's been doing for many, many years. Or do you agree with the cabinet ministers who are saying to the newspapers in today's front pages, it's outrageous, it's anti-constitutional, he's not supposed to have opinions and air them, he's certainly not supposed to criticise government policy? I'll be talking to plenty of people with opinions about that a little bit later on in the show. We'll also be talking about fracking in about an hour's time. Is it time to open up the debate about fracking? Is it time to open up the fracking sites themselves and try to do something to stop this energy crisis that we're all facing and will be facing for a number of years, obviously sparked by the war in Ukraine and general inflation? Or do you think that that is an irresponsible way forward? Do we need to do what Michael Gove wants and really concentrate on renewable sources of energy? You can let me know what you think about that. Plenty more coming up, but I want to start off this morning talking about a story that actually isn't on the front pages of today's story, which I think is a real shame because it is a horrendous story, the one we were talking about so much earlier in the week. The two soldiers who were fighting in the Ukrainian army, but they are British men who have been arrested. They were arrested in April. They were captured by Russian forces, and they've now been subjected to, I think, what can be described as a kangaroo court, not a court that's been recognised by any of the international community, and certainly not by British government or law system, and they have been sentenced to death. We know they have a month to appeal that sentence, but how terrifying for them, how terrifying for their families. So obviously our first thoughts are sympathy for them, outrage on their behalf, but what's really going on here? Are they being used as political pawns in the diplomatic scene, behind the scenes, by President Putin? Well, I'm really thrilled to say I have somebody who has been studying President Putin for many, many years. In fact, at one point, my guest was the biggest investor in Russia, but he is certainly a thorn in Russia's side now. He's certainly persona non grata, and I even understand that he's been subjected not just to death threats but to actual execution or assassination attempts. So I'm really, really thrilled to say a very warm welcome to Bill Browder. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Bill, I've just said that my understanding is that President Putin has actually has tried to have you killed. Is that just a rumour, or is that based on fact?
So what's happened was that Putin and his cronies arrested my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, in 2008. They tortured him for 358 days and murdered him in Russian police custody. I then went on a mission to get justice for him, which led to something called the Magnitsky Act, which freezes the assets and bans the visas of people in the Putin regime. There have been a number of other Russians who joined me in this exercise. A politician named Boris Nemtsov, and they murdered him back in 2015. Another Russian named Vladimir Kara-Murza joined me in lobbying different parliaments and governments, and he was poisoned with Novichok and nearly died. And then they poisoned him again. They've been chasing me all around the world with death threats and extradition requests They arrested me in Madrid in 2018, and Putin even asked Trump to hand me over at the Helsinki summit in July of 2018. And so they've been trying to get me back to kill me as well. And so I mean, these are really brutal, horrible people, and I have shock and sympathy for the families and for these three individuals actually. There's a Moroccan man as well.
Yes, quite right.
They're all sitting there and wondering what Putin is going to do with them, and why how he's going to make some type of terrible example out of them.
So just to remind viewers and listeners this morning, it's Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner. They are British nationals, but I think they have Ukrainian nationality as well. One is married to a Ukrainian woman, one is engaged. They've been living in Ukraine for some years, and they have been paid up soldiers of the Ukrainian army for some time. They didn't just join up when the war started. The Russians are accusing them in this, as I described it, kangaroo court in Donetsk. They are accusing them of being mercenaries, and if you're a mercenary and not a soldier, a bona fide soldier, you're not covered by the Geneva Convention, is their argument. Of course, the UK government is saying this is outrageous, that they should be covered by the Geneva Convention. But I just wonder whether this whole story, I mean, obviously everybody is praying that they don't get executed by firing squad, which is what they're facing, that their appeal is successful. I suspect their appeal will not be successful, but I also suspect that this is more about propaganda, making a big statement on behalf of the Russians, and potentially about a prisoner swap.
Well, I think, first of all, we need to unpick this whole thing. We're giving way too much credit to all their nonsense. So first of all, they're saying this is not Russia, this is the Donetsk People's Republic. Let's just stop this. Let's not repeat that anymore. This is Russia. And we, by the way, we've been doing this for 8 years, since 2014, when we call them Russian-backed separatists. That's nonsense. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, and they sent in their own mercenaries, and this is a Russian operation. And whatever is happening to these individuals is a Russian. There's no court there. This is a Russian, a Russian nonsense operation. If Russia decides to take hostage individuals with British passports and kill them, that's no different than the Islamic State doing the same thing. And it is terrorism, plain and simple. And we have to identify it such. This is Vladimir Putin's terrorism, plain and simple. It's an attack on Britain. Whether or not they were in the military, whether or not they were Ukrainian citizens, I mean, let's just put that aside. This is Vladimir Putin terrorizing Britain by taking 2 people hostage, and just like those hostage videos, holding a knife to their throat. And that's how we have to look at this, and that's how we have to react to it. And all this talk about there's appeals, and this is, that they have 1 month to appeal, that's just giving credit to some complete and utter nonsense, like saying when ISIS takes these people, they have 1 month to appeal. Vladimir Putin is taking 2 British people hostage and threatening to kill them by firing squad, and we have to have an appropriate, robust reaction to that.
But Bill, so that leads to the obvious question: what is the appropriate reaction to that? Because, as you've quite rightly said, you've compared this to terrorism, and of course we know that British governments officially do not negotiate with terrorists, so they're left in a very difficult position because the usual diplomatic channels are not available in this case.
Well, then we should not use diplomatic channels. We should reply to this asymmetrically. So far, Britain has sanctioned some Russian oligarchs that are looking after Putin's money. We could sanction. So I think we'd sanction 35 of the 118 oligarchs. We should go sanction the rest of them, immediately. We should just absolutely without remorse go after every rich Russian oligarch who has assets in the UK. That'll make Putin pay attention. And then we should also look for other asymmetric responses. We have cyber weapons. We should use them. I mean, if they want to start doing terrorism and taking British people hostage, then it's time to take off the gloves and really start punching hard with these guys.
It's interesting you mentioning sanctions because, of course, many people are saying London was Londongrad for so many years. We pretty much, opened our arms and our capital city to all these Russian oligarchs, many of whom had very shady backgrounds, that we've almost created a situation where, we fueled their coffers, their finances, we welcomed them. And then at the same time, we have been at the forefront of, being an ally of Ukraine. So potentially, is that one of the reasons why British-born soldiers will be more valuable than others? Because Putin knows that Zelensky's going to do everything he can to help Boris Johnson get the release of these two Brits. So potentially they're more valuable when it does come to negotiating a prisoner exchange.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is just hostage taking for ransom, and these are high value hostages because they're British. But we should make sure that if any British person is ever taken hostage, whether in this scenario or any other scenarios, that Vladimir Putin understands that he's going to lose everything, and all this sort of tiptoeing around and calling this Donetsk People's Court, and they have 1 month to appeal. Let's just stop that. Let's just call this Vladimir Putin hostage taking and go after Vladimir Putin. And we know that he's got a lot of money here, and most of the money hasn't been touched. And we can be much more robust about this, and we should be much more robust about this.
Because I know, Bill, we haven't got a lot of time left. I know that you've written a book about money laundering in the UK, or Freezing Order, I think it's called, True Story of Money Laundering, Murder and Surviving Vladimir Putin's Wrath. So what is the answer to that much bigger question of money laundering, but particularly Russian money laundering? Is it just, as you've already mentioned, sanctions, or are there other things we should be doing?
Well, I mean, so the irony here is that as you mentioned, the UK has been one of the most welcoming places for all this blood money sloshing around, particularly in London, and that's a shame on this country. I've been living here 33 years. I've been disgusted by it. I've been shouting about it for a long time. No one's listening. But that also creates an incredible opportunity for us because we have leverage. If Vladimir Putin and his cronies have money here, that is leverage that we can take advantage of, and we should freeze that money, and we should seize that money. After it's frozen, it should go through a proper court process, and we should seize that money and use that money for the rebuilding of Ukraine. And if they want to take British people hostages, they're going to see a huge price for that. That's what has to happen.
Really interesting points there. Bill Browder, thank you so much for talking to me, getting this show off to such a cracking start. We'll be back in a minute. Well, a very good morning to you. The time is 20 minutes past 10. Daisy McAndrew here, sitting in for Richard Tice until 1 o'clock this afternoon, and we have a lot of different issues, stories to get through. But the one that we're concentrating on now is this issue about relocating migrants to Rwanda, Priti Patel's flagship policy that obviously has caused a lot of controversy. There's been court cases, appeals saying that it's unlawful. She's won the latest round in the courts to get her policy off the ground, literally get those planes flying to Rwanda. We're expecting the first plane load of migrants to be sent to Rwanda this coming week. But it has divided opinion. And in fact, I can see lots of you getting in touch, which is thrilling. You can text me or call me or tweet me. The Twitter handle is at Daisy McAndrew. Lots of people have been doing that. Let me just give you a taste of what people are saying. Anna says, we are all allowed an opinion in this country, even Prince Charles, who voiced his opinion. And of course, that opinion was that he thought it was appalling. He thought the policy was appalling. Anna says he voiced his opinion in private, not in a speech or any public event. Until he is king, he is allowed an opinion. And then Terry says, I'm disappointed at the way the press is portraying Prince Charles's comments. He did not involve himself in politics. He's entitled to private thoughts and opinion. The problem isn't Charles, it's the culture of people scurrying off to the press at any opportunity when anyone in public life says something that was says something in private, says Terry. But in fact, David has the opposite view, and David says Prince Charles isn't stupid. He made the remarks in private, knowing full well they would be made public. If he hadn't wanted his views known, he wouldn't have mentioned it. Prince Charles has always been controversial and seems to revel in it. Unfortunately, Prince William seems to be heading down the same path. Well, who do you agree with? Does Charles have every right to voice his opinions, or should he be keeping himself out of politics? And that is clearly what cabinet ministers think. The anonymous cabinet minister's been briefing the newspapers, all on the front pages today, saying it's a constitutional outrage, and Prince Charles is going to get himself in a lot of hot water if he continues voicing controversial political opinions. Well, somebody who will have his own opinions on this, I'm delighted to welcome to the show David Mellor, of course, former Conservative MP and cabinet member. Very good morning to you, David.
Hi, morning, Daisy, and perhaps more relevantly for this discussion, had the joy that it wasn't always spending 5 years at the Home Office.
Well,
so
quite. So, David, put yourself back in the Home Office. You're there in the Home Office right now. You're trying to push this policy forward of sending migrants or asylum seekers to Rwanda, and then you hear that Prince Charles thinks it's appalling. What would your reaction be?
Well, I think Prince Charles has got to tread carefully. I think people think that Prince Charles has opinions, and a lot of people, including I myself, agree with a lot of his opinions, but he really does have to be careful voicing them, because basically he is he's lining up to be king. It could happen at any time soon, and he really mustn't allow himself to be caught so readily by the media appearing to be wanting to involve himself in controversy, something his much-loved mother never did, and it helped her enormously that she didn't.
I've been wondering over the last few days whether the fact that she's never put a foot wrong in this way, got embroiled in a controversy about her own opinions, is probably because she got onto the throne. She took over the job at the tender age of 27, and so has been thrust into the day-to-day role of being the monarch ever since. Whereas Charles has had to forge opinions and interests because he's had nothing else to do for the last 70 years, in adulthood.
I feel a pretty sad old guy, and I am 4 months younger than him because we were at Cambridge together, and I feel sorry for him, but he has done a lot of good. Let's be quite clear about this. He's done an awful lot of good, but he just shouldn't make it too easy for the people who don't like him to have a go at him. And I think, for him to go around saying what he said to friends who plainly can't be trusted, because 2 newspapers claim this as an exclusive, just silly.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you were at Cambridge, and I have to say, flattery and everything, you look significantly younger than Prince Charles, David Mellor. So
it's a facelift, babe. I tell you, I've spent thousands of pounds on my face.
You must give me the number of your surgeon.
It's genetic, I think. My grandfather died at 98, still living in his own home, and, you know, perfectly looking like 20 years younger. So let's hope that the genes still work for me.
Let's hope so. But did you know Charles at Cambridge? What was he like?
I didn't know him that well. He was a different college. But over the years, I have met him a lot. I used to see quite a lot when she was alive of Princess Diana on things like the AIDS campaign. And, you know, Charles is a very intense guy. He would love to get together people who he thought had answers to various issues. He'd sit them down for dinner and then he'd interrogate them. I mean, the thing is, he could just be, and this is what when you look at some of the other members of the family, I mean, he could be Prince Andrew. I wouldn't wish that fate on my worst enemy, but he could be Prince Andrew, a sort of fairly gormless, useless, once he left the armed forces, useless fellow. Prince Charles is not like that. He is committed to a whole lot of policies, and he hasn't been wrong about a lot of them. Factory farming, he wasn't wrong about that. He hasn't been wrong about some crude modern architecture that disfigures, was it a
carbuncle,
monstrous carbuncle on the face of a beloved friend? He's got a good way of making the language, but the problem for him is that not everyone accepts his moral authority. Not everybody believes that he's as good a chap as he likes to present himself as, and as I personally believe him to be. And so the consequence of this is he really has got to keep himself in check. There's nothing to stop him continuing to write to ministers. There's nothing to stop him expressing his views. What he cannot do is express his views to people who run off to the newspapers. It's just stupid.
Yes, and he should assume that is pretty much everybody he speaks to is probably going to repeat what he said. Yeah. And I wonder in some ways, David, given that the government has had a pretty torrid few weeks, Boris Johnson just surviving that confidence vote, but certainly damaged by it, I wonder if in some ways Prince Charles's comments are rather useful in pushing other government woes off the front pages.
Yes, I mean he's a useful diversion. But on the point that he makes, I mean, I spent 5 years at the Home Office. It's impossible to feel really very comfortable about this Rwanda policy. Equally, though, it's impossible not to think that something has to be done to stop people just deciding to descend on this country. We need a workforce. We're chronically short of workers in a whole lot of key areas, but there are ways in which a workforce can be recruited. And the mere fact that you turn up on a beach from France shouldn't give you the right to just settle there to effectively jump the queue. And I do feel Priti Patel, bless her. I mean, I'm sure she's well-intentioned. I'm sure she's kind to animals. I'm sure she helps old ladies across the road. But as Home Secretary, she's useless.
I applaud your confidence in all her virtues. But I mean, my opinion on the Rwanda policy, I don't have anything against it in theory. I just don't think it's going to work in practice.
It isn't. You and I are united in this. You may be 70 years younger than me, but you've got it.
So what would you do, David, with the benefit of hindsight all those years at the Home Office? What is the answer? Because I think we're agreed that this isn't the answer, but we're also agreed something must be done.
Well, the answer is to be able to remove these people quickly, and that means they have to be not given access to the courts. Just because I turn up on a beach in southern England, why should I then have free lawyers, often with a political agenda, clustering round trying to keep me in this country? And of course that would require changes to legislation, which Priti Patel, she can read. After all, she can read the legislation.
She's certainly got a full inbox, and I'm really sorry, but I've got a full programme. So David Mellor, thank you so much. We'll be back in just a minute.
I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'm a Talk TV presenter. The last tweet that I really liked was a guy on a petrol forecourt who tweeted, "I've just seen a guy on pump 3 fill up with £10 worth of petrol. Where's he driving to? Pump 4? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never miss a moment with Talk TV."
is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Ukraine remains in control of the Azot chemical plant in Severodonetsk, where hundreds of civilians are sheltering, according to the region's governor. Russian shelling has caused a huge fire at the plant, where non-stop fighting rages on. The area in eastern Ukraine has become the focal point of Russia's efforts. Tens of thousands of protesters have rallied across the US to call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a number of mass shootings. 19 children and 2 adults were killed at Robb Elementary in Uvalde in Texas on the 24th of May. Just days earlier in Buffalo, New York, another 10 people were killed at a supermarket. US President Joe Biden backed the protests, but the chances of legal change are likely to be quashed by Republicans. Protesters say mass shootings cannot be normalized.
I'm tired of it, tired of going to school every day, scared that I'm going to lose my friends, myself, everyone at my school. We all know how to protect ourselves against people who might shoot up the school.
The government will bring forward legislation tomorrow that complies with a law to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol that governs trade following Brexit. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said the plans are lawful, but Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said she couldn't understand how the changes would not breach international law. The government's looking into repealing a legal ban that prevents agency staff filling in for striking workers. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph a potential change in legislation could allow companies to hire temporary workers to cover some roles and prevent disruption. But any intervention would not affect the rail strikes across the country later this month. And the Queen now holds another important title, the world's second longest reigning modern monarch. Her Majesty's overtaken a king in Thailand who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Well, welcome back. The time is 28 minutes to 11 o'clock. This is Daisy McAndrew. Talk TV, of course, broadcasting to you from the Talk Radio studios, and delighted to have your company. This is, as you know, the home of common sense, but it's also somewhere where I want to hear from you. What do you think about the stories that we're discussing today? Or tell me what you want to discuss. Well, so far we have talked about those British men, kangaroo court, being sentenced to death by shooting, but by firing squad. Horrendous story, and what should be done about that. My first guest saying we really need to increase sanctions and we need to increase the pressure. But making the point that, of course, having spent so many years welcoming, as he called it, blood money, Russian oligarchs into our capital, taking out huge amounts of, them putting in huge amounts of money into this country, we were very, very slow to realise that that wasn't such a clever idea. I've also been talking about Prince Charles. Does he have every right to an opinion? Is he the same as everyone else in that category, or in that sense? Well, of course, he's not the same as everyone else. He's the future heir, 73-year-old runner-up for that job. And many of you saying that he needs to be much more careful about what he says. Well, let's talk to Paul in Staffordshire. Very good morning to you, Paul. How are you?
Daisy. Good morning, Daisy. How are you this morning? Sunday,
I'm delighted to have your call. Is this about Prince Charles?
Yeah. Regarding Prince Charles, he's got every right to say what he says about things, but with the magic of the Queen over the last 70 years, she's stayed out of politics and she's stayed above the law, hasn't she? Above the politics, and I think it works in royalty, but I think, like I said, he's got every right to say what he thinks about issue of the day. But if he does get when he does come king, and I think things will change. But will the MPs agree with him and to change the way things are when he becomes king?
I mean, I suspect he'll be more tactful when he is King Charles instead of the Prince of Wales. But of course, by that time, the politicians may have got very, very angry about his previous indiscretions. And on this issue of Rwanda, Paul, do you agree with the government, or do you agree with Prince Charles that
really,
it's...
Not really, no. I don't think I do, no, not really. Because, obviously, we could find him work here. This country, I'm sure that there's jobs out there, I'm sure there is. But I don't agree with it, no. Not really, personally, no.
No, I mean, as I keep saying, it's not my disapproval of this policy is nothing to do with, sort of being a lily-livered liberal and wanting to, have no control over our borders. It's not that at all. I desperately think that the border issue needs to be sorted out and that we need to get a grip on immigration. But I just don't think that this policy is going to work. I think we're just going to... All that's going to happen is lots of lawyers are going to get very, very rich arguing about it in a court of law.
Yeah, I know. And also another 2 years before the Queen, and she was the longest-serving monarch of all time, wasn't it?
Of all time. I think today she's become the second longest-serving monarch, and another couple of years. Well, as we say, long may she reign over us. Paul, it was lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for calling. Of course, Paul called 0344 499 1000, and so must you if you want to tell me what you think about any of these issues. And we're also going to be talking about fracking later in the programme. Again, I would really like to know what your view on that issue is, because whilst we all know that we have an energy crisis, we all know that we need to produce more of our own energy. We mustn't be reliant on particularly Russia, of course, but really we mustn't be reliant on any country to have the power to turn on or turn off our energy supply. So more homegrown energy is the answer. More storage is obviously the answer. But nobody wants to have a fracking site near their own homes, do they? No MP wants to campaign to put a fracking site in his or her constituency. No local planning office is very keen. So we've got a really big issue there. Michael Gove seemingly rowing back on the idea that fracking might be used again soon, although we know that some members of the Cabinet are keen on that. But I'm keen on knowing what you think. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000. And that is the number that Richard called me on. Very good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, Daisy. Thank you very much indeed for taking my call.
Not at all.
I've been on the greatest radio show in the world for the last 4 or 5 years, battling against the people who didn't want Brexit and then getting it. And then when you learn that the Prime Minister is a Remainer and she was kidding us and behind our backs telling people, oh, no, I'm going to stay with one foot in the EU, they won't be able to get over it, and all the other things. But my point is, please, I'd love your comments on this. I've been studying for the last week. I'm an old man, so I have plenty of time to study these things. And Clinton's wife came yesterday, and you probably read it in the paper that she was with David Miliband, who was formerly an MP for Middlesbrough. Mm-hmm. And she gave a lecture regarding something. I don't know what it was. I've been trying to find out. But do you think that signals that maybe Miliband is the next one to come into Sir Keir Starmer's spot when I think he'll just get out when he's ready?
I don't think so, because he's based in America. David Miliband, of course, Ed Miliband's brother. Yeah. He runs a very, very big organisation that is concerned with refugees, I believe, and I think that's his involvement with Hillary Clinton. I suspect it signals more that potentially he's going to get involved in American politics rather than come back into British politics. I might be wrong. I'm guessing that you're not a Labour voter.
Yes, I was a Labour voter for many years, and then I went off Mr Blair for all the things that he was doing just to keep himself ingratiated with the money circles, and I chose to fight the Brexit thing, which we won, thanks very much to your radio station, incidentally, who stuck by us all the way through. Everybody else was against us, and everybody else has been against Boris since the day that he went into number 10. And I think he has taken an atrocious amount of terrible criticism, a lot of it probably due to him, but a lot of it not, and only for political means. And that is my whole point about Mr Blair going into Davos, I think, this week and prophesying, as he does, the future of Britain. I wonder, do you think that that's right for him to go and talk to billionaires and trillionaires and whoever? I know he's not a Democrat anymore because he's gone against our leaving Brexit. But do you think he has a right to go and start to say, well, I'm the Messiah again, and I'm going to tell this country what to do?
I think it's very interesting that we've seen both Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson putting their heads above the parapet in the last week. Peter Mandelson made a really interesting speech in Durham earlier this week, talking about what the Labour Party has to do to regain people like you, former Labour supporters who left the Labour Party, who left supporting the Labour Party, who possibly voted Brexit as you did? And now how does the Labour Party get those people back, particularly in the Red Wall? I know you're in Manchester, Richard, but sort of further north in those Red Wall seats. That is clearly the target that the Labour Party now has to concentrate on, getting those voters back. And Peter Mandelson was talking about the economy being the area that the Labour Party really has to put some meat on the bones, because the Labour Party doesn't have any really catching economic policies, things that will actually appeal and get through to people. Now, funny enough, I read Peter Mandelson's comments very closely, and I couldn't see what he was suggesting would be those economic policies. He was talking about some quite niche things like artificial intelligence and things like that. But I think that is absolutely right. Over the next few years, everybody is going to be feeling a lot poorer than they had done. Everybody is going to be noticing that there is a cost of living crisis, and that's the area that the Labour Party really does need to concentrate on. But I wonder if there were policy areas that would get you back into the Labour fold, Richard.
Well, only if some honesty prevails and if they stop this trying to smash our democracy. I was down in the Commons and I was talking to a few of the MPs, and I was nearly crying because the emotion of actually winning the Brexit, and I saw people who actually supported it, and I was just saying to them, thank you very, very much indeed for bringing a bit of honesty, because I felt strongly that the EU is going to be finished in 5 years' time, and people are going to be saying, no, you can't control us, you can't control our finances, you can't, say we've got to borrow money here and borrow money there, and you can't send us 3 million people over, and can we find them council houses, and can we find them education, and
Richard, I bet those politicians were quite shocked at having somebody like you thanking them rather than attacking them, and I want to thank you for calling. Lots more coming up between now and 1 o'clock. Time is 11:15. Don't be shy about getting involved between now and 1 o'clock. This is Daisy McAndrew. Talk TV, of course, broadcasting to you from the Talk Radio studios. But I would love to hear your opinions on any of the topics we're discussing, whether it's Prince Charles and Rwanda, whether it's the soldiers facing that death sentence in Ukraine. And this story that I want to tell you about now, there is a headmistress of an all-girls school, and that's important in this discussion, who has decided that she's not going to generally call the girls girls. So when she's writing letters to parents, she's going to say things like your child instead of your daughter. I think she'll probably be calling girls them instead of she. You know where this is going, and it seems absolutely bonkers. There are another couple of stories that I spotted in today's papers as well. There's one in the Telegraph saying MPs seek school uniform banks for struggling families. Now, that is actually a very positive story that I want to talk about a little bit later, the cost of uniforms. But this other story about school uniform goes gender neutral as girls' skirts are banned. A secondary school has banned girls from wearing skirts in order to create a more gender neutral uniform policy. This is parents of Tiverton High School in Devon, of course, where that by-election is going on. I wonder if it'll become a political issue in that by-election. They were informed on June the 9th that the modifications to the school uniform would come into effect from September. Pupils at the co-ed school will have to ditch their skirts, which are currently permitted, and attend lessons wearing trousers instead. Headmistress said we will follow other secondary schools implementing a more gender-neutral uniform policy. And bringing you back to the other story with the headmistress of a single-sex school, private school will no longer refer to pupils as girls. Well, I think I know somebody who's going to have an opinion on this issue. Kelly J. Keane, founder of Standing for Women. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Daisy.
Is this a sensible idea to stop calling girls girls or to ban girls wearing skirts?
The skirt issue, I think, is completely separate. And if it was done for the to allow girls to thrive and not worry about tucking up, folding up or lifting up or whatever they do with skirts, then I think what a great idea that we just eliminate any of the issues or difficulties girls might have with skirts, or certainly give them an option for trousers. But I don't think that's got anything to do with this crazy notion that we need to erase the word girls from language when we're talking about girls. It's insane.
And presumably this is because this headmistress is attempting to be inclusive, and my concern is that attempting to be inclusive can often backfire.
Well, inclusion these days seems to mean erase and exclude women. You know, when we include men in women's sports, we exclude some women. When we include or exclude the word girls to be inclusive, then we really just have erased the word girl. I mean, that's what my campaign has always been about. It's about recognising language really, really matters. And back in 2018, we put up that billboard because we recognised the word woman was being erased. And here we are 4 years later, and now girls are completely being erased in schools. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And what do you think girls at this school would think about this policy? I just wonder whether there's a generational change or a generational difference on this issue, because certainly when I talk to my nieces and nephews or my kids about these issues, I don't think they would particularly care about the headmistress taking the word girl out of her vocabulary, whereas people our age I think really do.
Well, I think children can be groomed into all sorts of ideas, and what we find throughout schools, especially girls' schools, is this pernicious social contagion, which means if they do care, they're really not going to say anything. I certainly know plenty of children, my own included, who really do care about the erasure of language. Could they say that amongst their peers? Absolutely not. So I think we're the adults here. It's great to listen to the whims and wants of children, but actually we're the adults. And so we have to decide whether or not it's a good thing to erase the word girls. And it's definitely not. You look at gender neutral uniforms. Are they switching to skirts? No, they're not. They're switching to trousers. So where the default is male, and that's certainly what will happen when we obliterate the word girls. I understand, as far as I'm aware, Eton is not erasing the word boy.
Yes, because that's the flip side, which I think often people forget. What you end up is having an imbalance where everything is either defined by being male or gender neutral, but then you lose the female side.
Absolutely, every single time. It's been happening since the dawn of time, that when it comes to something that can be easily erased, diminished or put aside, it does seem to be women. And I say this as a woman who absolutely hates to admit that, because I don't want to appear to be a victim. I don't want women to think that there is anything lesser or weaker to being women, because I think I love being a woman. But it does just keep getting, these stories are just so insistent that the word woman, girls, female language, all of it has to be erased, that it's really, really difficult to ignore.
And Kelly, I was just thinking about, you mentioned your children there and the fact that whilst they would agree with you in private, they would feel uncomfortable saying what you're saying in public at their school. And I think that is, and obviously we saw the teenager recently who spoke out, who said she was horrendously bullied at school to the point where she felt she couldn't go to school anymore for speaking out on these issues. And I wonder whether what your children feel about what you do very, very publicly, because I remember the children of Brexiteers being terribly badly bullied at school when their schoolmates found out that their parents were Brexiteers, in that same way that that many of the schools were being quite brainwashed against Brexit. And I just wonder if your kids have had any experience of that.
Well, when my boys started uni, I couldn't drop them off because I just thought it would just be so terrible. It's not like I'm particularly well known, but if you know who I am and you're a student, it's likely that you don't like me very much. So I couldn't drop them off. My teenage children are, they're very proud of what I do. They think standing up for your rights is a really important thing to do. And I don't go and make a I don't stand with a placard outside of their schools. So I'm quite respectful that they deserve their own lives without my views or my whatever it is that I do, campaigning, getting in the way. But yeah, they're very proud of me. So it's, I'm really pleased that somebody is standing up for these rights, and if not me, then who? Well,
I love that they're proud of you, but that story about not being able to drop your own child at university is kind of heartbreaking, isn't it? And I wonder, just thinking about the wider politics of the issue at the moment, and we've seen the Labour Party get itself, we've seen politicians of all parties, to be fair, get themselves in complete tangles over this issue and constantly being asked about, can women have penises and all the rest of it. And some of those arguments can get very unpleasant, and you feel sorry for people who are trying to make sense of what's going on in the world. And, of course, most politicians formed their ideas or their philosophies, their ideologies, many, many years ago, and never gave this issue any thought. Like so many of us didn't give this issue much thought, and now we're being forced to think about this issue because it's become such a hot potato. And I have sympathy with politicians that haven't really worked out what they think, because I think a lot of people are in that boat.
See, I don't, because I think they're dishonest. I think if you fundamentally hold a belief, you can say it and express it in a really straightforward manner. And the fact that so many people trip over this language, I think is just because they're being dishonest, because they don't really think. Keir Starmer, I'm sure, I hate to speak for him, but I don't think he thinks that women genuinely have penises. I don't think that Stella Creasy genuinely thinks that some women are actually men or vice versa. I think it's a foolish thing to do, because this ideology will be a flash in the pan. In the whole history of the human race, it will just be a short time where people will pretend that they don't understand biological sex and its implications. And then that time will be gone, and there will be egg on the face of all of those people that did pretend that they thought biological sex was actually something you could choose, and that more fixed in a human being was their gender identity, something which nobody can even explain what it is. So I don't have sympathy. I think their job is to speak for the people, speak honestly and speak with conviction. And if they don't do that, they don't really deserve a seat in the House of Parliament.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you, and good luck with the campaign. And I do hope that you'll be able to drop your children off wearing a placard, if you want to wear a placard, without worrying that they're going to be bullied for it. Kelly J. Keane, thank you so much, and have a lovely Sunday. We are coming up to the end of the first hour, and I just want to say thank you so much for all your calls and texts and tweets, and keep them coming. Of course, you can give me a ring. Are you interested in fracking in your area? Would you like to see fracking sites open up all over the country, but perhaps not in your backyard? I think that is what a lot of people think about that issue, but let me know. 0344 499 1000. Perhaps you've got one of the sites in your local area that are due to be cemented over at the end of this month, June. So do we want to stop that happening, and do we want to go full steam ahead for fracking, or would that be very bad for the environment, as a lot of people do maintain? Lots and lots coming up. Of course, you can tweet me at Daisy McAndrew. Tell me what you think, or you can send a text message to 87222, but do use the word talk. And, of course, let me know what you thought about that issue, that headmistress who said she's not going to call girls girls anymore.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. A Ukrainian MP says his country needs more weapons from the West because their current capability is limited in the onslaught of Russian aggression. In the latest significant attack by Russian forces, overnight shelling caused a fire at a chemical plant in Severodonetsk, where hundreds of civilians are sheltering, according to the region's governor. The area in eastern Ukraine has become the focal point of Russia's efforts, with most of the city now said to be under Russian control. The government will bring forward legislation tomorrow that complies with the law to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol that governs trade following Brexit. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said the plans are lawful, but Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said today she couldn't understand how the changes would not breach international law. More than 400 protests have taken place across the United States to call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a number of mass shootings. And 19 children and 2 adults were killed at Robb Elementary in Uvalde in Texas on the 24th of May. Just days earlier, in Buffalo, New York, another 10 people were killed at a supermarket. US President Joe Biden backed the protest, but the chances of legal change are likely to be quashed by Republicans. Protesters say mass shootings cannot be normalized.
I think we're reaching a tipping point where we're about to hit desensitization to gun violence. And I think that we're not there yet. And I think that this is going to be the amount of mass shootings that has happened. I think that if this trend continues and if we don't choose to take this opportunity to fight back, it's going to continue again. The cycle is going to continue.
The government's looking into repealing a legal ban that prevents agency staff filling in for striking workers. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph a potential change in legislation could allow companies to hire temporary workers to cover some roles and prevent disruption. But any intervention would not affect the rail strikes across the country later this month. Transport editor for the Daily Mail, David Churchill, says agency staff will only help to a certain point.
Unfortunately, they won't be able to cover some of the skilled jobs like signalling, train drivers, things like that are quite skilled jobs. And unfortunately, it'll only go so far in limiting the chaos.
Police in the American state of Idaho have arrested 31 members of a white supremacist group and charged them with conspiracy to riot at a Pride event. Police say they were tipped off by a local resident who'd spotted the men with masks and shields getting into a lorry. The men were members of the Patriot Front group. And the Queen now holds another important title, the world's second longest reigning modern monarch. Her Majesty's overtaken a king in Thailand who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. Now time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
This morning across the UK will be generally fine with scattered showers, mainly in the northwest. For many, though, it will be a dry end to the weekend with sunny spells. Looking at northern Scotland, we can see there are still some scattered showers around, though these will be less frequent than yesterday. Winds will ease throughout the day, but it will still be breezy for a time across northern parts of the UK, especially over any high ground. Now, moving southwards to Wales and central parts of England, there'll be some isolated showers this morning, particularly over high ground, though there will be sunny spells too. It's a similar picture for southern England and the Channel Isles, but there'll only be a few showers, mostly for western coasts. Feeling pleasant here in the sunshine. The fine weather continues this afternoon with sunny spells and some showers, mainly in the northwest.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
The biggest issue in Britain right now is the cost of living crisis. Energy bills have become ridiculous. Second biggest issue, extraordinarily, is nobody can define what a woman is.
Well, hello and a very, very good morning. The time is 4 minutes past 11. I'm Daisy McAndrew. I will be with you here on Talk TV until 1 o'clock this afternoon. We had a cracking first hour of the show. Thank you so much to all the people who contacted us, either by phoning 0344 499 1000 or texting or tweeting me at Daisy McAndrew or the whole team. You can get hold of them on Twitter at Talk TV. And over the next few minutes, I want to talk about fracking and about the energy crisis that we all know we're facing. We need more homegrown energy, whether that's solar-powered, wind-powered, whatever it might be. But is it now time to lift the moratorium on fracking? That moratorium was put in 2019, I think it was, some years ago. And I know that some of the fracking sites are due to be cemented up later this month. But at a time when we don't have enough energy stored, we've pretty much got rid of all our gas storage in this country. It was another big mistake that politicians oversaw. We can't be reliant on Russia, obviously, for obvious reasons. Luckily, we are slightly less reliant than some of our European contemporaries over the other side of the Channel. But nonetheless, we know that we have been caught snoozing when it's come to our own homegrown energy. So would you like to see a fracking site in your local area? Because that seems to me the ultimate problem with fracking, is that no MP is going to back having a fracking site in his or her own constituency. It's NIMBYism on a large scale. So we know that some cabinet ministers, some politicians are pro, some are very anti. But where do you sit? You can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. On this issue, and delighted to welcome Lois Perry to the show. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Daisy. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm delighted. Lois, just explain to people what you do, first of all, so they know where you're coming from. You know, what's the campaign that you run?
Yeah, well, I'm the director of a campaigning organisation called CAR26, and that stands for Climate Analysis Reason. And we set it up around COP26 last year as a counterbalance to COP26, really, and to take the mickey a little bit and to highlight to normal people what net zero will really mean to them, which is actually a complete annihilation of what we now consider to be normal life. You know, being able to jump in your car, being able to heat your home, being able to, you know, just have a normal way of life without being restricted in any way. And and this is a massive thing for us, because fracking will enable us to have energy security and to be able to have constant, not free, but free-flowing, cheap energy. And it's essential, absolutely essential. That's why we have a petition to stop the fracking ban, to end the fracking ban, which if people Google it, then they can sign. And I urge them to sign it and to get their friends to sign it too.
I mean, obviously there are plenty of downsides to fracking, which people talk about, you know, a lot. They talk about the dangers of tremors or earthquakes. They talk about the pollution that fracking would bring.
Can I just say, though, that actually, although those things have been well publicised, they are completely and fundamentally false. And a huge amount of those particular things that you've mentioned, it's now been outed in the Daily Mail, the Express, and lots of other mainstream publications, that these particular lies were pushed out by Russian agents working in the UK, funding protesters, paying them £36,000 a year, a massive PR campaign with... Fracking is not dangerous. The tremors that are felt, if there are any tremors, are roughly the same as sitting down on a chair. There isn't any pollution. There's lots and lots of ways to clean the water. Wind turbines are much worse for the environment. You can't recycle them. They're made in China using electricity, which is made using coal stations, power stations. The whole thing is a little bit of a farce, and we must address this. Michael Gove's decision to overturn just drilling to get a little piece of rock so that it can be tested in Rotherham is absolutely ludicrous. I can't think of any other way apart from sabotaging us, to be honest.
So just to take a step back, I mean, that issue you were talking about of the Russians, obviously, I'm sure people will have worked it out for themselves, but the theory behind why Russians would have got involved in a debate in the UK about fracking is because Russia wanted to continue to sell its own energy, and therefore it wasn't in Russia's benefit to see fracking up and running in the UK. And just coming back to what you said about how much energy fracking would provide, explain to us how many fracking sites there are, or potentially how many there could be.
Well, I mean, there could be as many as as possible. Apparently, the gas that's under our feet, the treasure that's under our feet in the UK, is actually much better quality than that's even in the States. And in the States, they are paying a sixth of what we're paying for their electricity because they frack. Now, there's millions of fracking sites in America. You know, if it was terrible, it wouldn't be happening, would it? And there's so many sites here that could be exploited. But, I mean, the government are even turning down permission to even just test, as I say, test a little bit of tiny rock to see if it's actually possible. So what's going on? I want to know what's actually going on, because it's nothing to do with looking after us. It really isn't.
And as far as MPs and fracking and the relationship therein, I mean, this seems to be one of the major problems, is that nobody wants fracking in their own backyard. So it's a sort of a NIMBYism writ large all over this issue.
Well, a way to overcome that would be to do something like which we had with the Olympic Act in 2006, which meant that they could overturn any planning legislation they wanted so that the Olympics could happen in 2012, which is what they did. And basically, it was able to cut through all existing planning legislation. And we are in an emergency, and that's what we should be doing now. But, I mean, who would want a wind farm in their backyard either? And that's what the government's proposing. I mean, they're hideous. They take up much more space. I mean, you have one drill rig, which is, I'm just checking here, 75 foot compared to one wind turbine, which is 400 foot. And you never, ever see one wind turbine, do you? So as for NIMBYism, I'd much rather have a drill rig near me than 100 wind turbines, which are hideous, I think.
And they would also provide local jobs. Well, Lois, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much. And I just urge listeners and viewers this morning, do you agree with Lois? Would you happily have a fracking site near where you live? Are you still concerned about the environmental impact of fracking, about the pollution that it's meant to cause, about tremors? Or do you agree with Lois that they have multiple, I mean, she said millions, I don't know if that's correct, fracking sites in the US? Of course, one of the arguments about the US compared to the UK in fracking is, of course, the US is a vast country, and a lot of the fracking that it is in the US are in areas that are very, very underpopulated, huge land mass with small populations, which is an argument, has been put forward as an argument of why it works in the States and it wouldn't necessarily work here, where we have a much more populated land mass. But you can give me a ring and tell me what you think. 0344 499 1000. Or do you think that Michael Gove really needs to get on top of this? He's now in charge of planning as well as levelling up and all the other issues that he has, and apparently he's been putting the brakes on any fracking going forward. So you can give me a ring on that. Tell me what you think. I'm delighted to see we've had lots of texts and tweets. You can tweet me at Daisy McAndrew, or you can text 87222, but put the word talk first so that we know you're talking to us specifically. And lots of you have been talking also about this issue of the headmistress. I probably shouldn't call her that. I should probably say the head of a school who's trying to erase the word girl from her vocabulary. Angela has said, Daisy, women have to stand up and refuse to be cancelled. How this headmistress, she says emphasis on mistress, can be allowed to erase the word girl is beyond belief. More to this than meets the eye, she says, and says she's enjoying the show. So thank you very much, Angela. Natasha says, talking about the Rwanda issue and the fact that we understand Prince Charles has said that he's appalled, or he finds the policy appalling. Natasha says, Rwanda or not, it's the vast numbers coming, she's talking about immigrants, which dilutes the standard of living for UK citizens. There appears to be no real desire to solve the problem. It's all headlines from this government and such a waste of a majority, really despair. Then Terry says, I'm disappointed the way the press is portraying Prince Charles's comments. Charles did not involve himself in politics. He's entitled to have private opinions. And Jules says Prince Charles's views on the Rwanda policy mean that he is a keen Brexiteer. given that the EU and its member states has the same policy of relocating migrants. Not quite. Although it was interesting during the Brexit campaign, wasn't it, when certain members of the royal household seemed to be implying that there were quite a lot of royal Brexiteers amongst senior working royals. Now, of course, we're led to believe that Prince Charles is very anti that Rwanda policy. But are you anti the Rwanda policy? I agree with David Mellor, who was saying earlier that he doesn't think the Rwanda policy will work. I think, rather like me, he didn't have anything against it in theory, but he just simply thought that the Home Office wasn't going to manage to make the policy work, that it wasn't going to be the deterrent that we keep being told it is. Priti Patel, he said some very peculiar things about how he thought she was probably very nice to grannies, but didn't really seem to have a grip on this policy. And as I said earlier, I do believe that the policy will simply end up, as so many of these policies do, just being fought in the courts. I remember following the case, this was many, many years ago, when the Home Office was trying to deport foreign criminals. Instead of them being sent to prison in UK prisons, they were trying to deport them from the country that they came from. And in fact, that policy was completely hopeless. It couldn't be that, we were damaging these prisoners' human rights. It was constantly being questioned in the courts. The Home Office, I think Charles Clarke was the Home Secretary at the time, the Home Office just had to keep fighting that policy in the courts, trying to fight those that would see the policy being withdrawn. And eventually it was quietly dropped. I still have no idea how many foreign prisoners we have in prisons over here, but I suspect that the migration situation won't be solved by this. And actually, I disagree with some of the tweets where people have been saying that immigration causes dilution of quality of life, because as David Mellor was saying earlier, we need a lot of workers. A huge number of businesses up and down the country cannot fill the roles, the vacancies that they have, but we need the right type of immigration and the right type of migrant coming here to fill those vacancies. Plenty more coming up on Talk TV. Well, the time is 11:20. This is Daisy McAndrew. I am keeping the seat warm between now and 1 o'clock this afternoon for Richard Tice. History doesn't tell us where he is or what he's doing, but I hope he's having a very, very nice day off, unless potentially he's campaigning, working very hard. But I have been asking you this morning, lots of questions. I've been asking you what you think of the government's Rwanda policy. Do you think Prince Charles has every right to voice concerns about that, albeit he was voicing concerns in private? But as many of you have pointed out, surely whatever he says in private, he must know is probably going to be repeated. Although someone else has said on Twitter that's never happened to the Queen, has it? Her private opinions that she's voiced in private very, very rarely get repeated. But maybe that's because she is very careful not to say anything controversial, even in private. But Prince Charles, we know, is very opinionated, and he's not frightened of giving us his opinions. Of course, we were talking about fracking just before the break there. Is it time to reopen fracking? I suspect it probably is, but that is my opinion. What's yours? You can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the call that Jim in Gateshead used to get through. Very good morning to you, Jim.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Oh, I'm spot on. Just very quickly on the immigration side of things, I think we should reinvest in our family, education, and teach our own people to do these jobs. It'll take a generation, but it'll be worth every penny. The other thing is about the fracking. They should frack everywhere. If they found it under where I live, they could compensate. We'll move somewhere else, because the people that are complaining about when the money starts rolling in into the pockets because of cheaper energy and the high quality jobs that it will produce, the high streets will get reinvigorated. People will have quality jobs. Pride in that we're a service-driven economy, and we need mini industrialisation, and also get a couple of pits sunk as well, because we're importing coal from around the world, and it's absolute madness when we're walking on it day in, day out, and we've got it. I mean, they shut the pits up in the northeast, and there was 200 years worth of high-quality coal underneath them. It just seems, because we've got the technology to make this cleaner, and like the young lady said, the things that we're bringing in from China, the solar panels as well, cannot be recycled, and they're using up precious minerals when we've got the carbon under our feet that's there to be used and exploited.
I think what you were saying about our economy was really interesting, Jim, how we're a service economy. You're absolutely spot on. Our productivity as an economy is very low, much lower than similar sized economies or Western economies, and we really need to get that productivity up. I mean, personally, I think the way to do that is to invest or to encourage more high-tech jobs. We're not going to be competing with nations on the cost of our labour, on labour-intensive industries. So we need to do some of the really smart Silicon Valley, or high-tech jobs.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's completely right, but that goes back to the education system.
Yeah.
The education system needs to be set up to, instead of being it needs to be vocational training to get people into these jobs. So they're ready to go into these jobs.
And more apprenticeships, I'm guessing.
Well, a massive amount of apprenticeships, and not an apprenticeship to be a barista in Starbucks, an apprentice to be an electrician.
A proper job.
Electronics, in everything, and we have got the quality of labour. I mean, both my sons are tradesmen, and they're actually quite proud of what they do, because what they make will be there for 100 years.
What do they make, Jim?
Well, one's a fabricator welder, so he does a lot of work in restaurants and such like, but also set up things in like new build factories and where they do all the air conditioning and that, so all the pipes are run, so they actually create the metal tubing, and my other son's a builder.
Very valuable work they both do. Jim, thank you so much for the call. Enjoy your Sunday afternoon. Let's go to Blackpool. John.
Hi.
Good morning to you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking, John. How are you?
I'm fine. It's regarding the fracking. First of all, I would like to say I have no objection to the fracking, even though I do live in the area of Blackpool, where we did experience many tremors and earthquakes, where we seem to be getting told didn't happen. but I can assure you, we live in the area, and we definitely had earthquakes. We definitely had tremors, and since the site at Lancashire was closed, everything went away.
Very interesting. So you felt that you were being lied to, that you could feel the tremor with your own body, and you were being told it never happened.
Yeah, all the time. On TV, radio, we've heard no end of people coming on saying that this didn't happen. You could actually check on Google when earthquakes take place, and if you look at the dates between the time that the fracking site was being operated by Quadrilla was going ahead, we had these issues. So,
and Jim, is the Quadrilla fracking site in Lancashire that you're referring to, is that one of the ones that's due to be cemented in at the end of this month?
It was, yes.
And what's your understanding now about its future?
As far as we know, it's been put on hold. The government have put it on hold in agreement with the company that's operating the site. It was due to already have been done. It should have been done two months ago.
Right.
They put a hold on it because of this situation. And like I say, I haven't personally got a problem with the fracking. What I have got a problem with is we experienced the earthquakes. There's nothing in place to protect people who live nearby, which I do, and obviously a lot of other people. Plus, with Blackpool, it's a coastal area with a lot of reclaimed land. And, our coastline was moved 10 mile further in, and it's full of sand. So obviously, what considers me is what we've got underneath us, and what could be disturbed by the process that takes place when you frack.
And presumably, Jim, you're representative of a lot of people in Blackpool. Would you say that the entire local community was against the fracking site?
No, well, like I say, we were told there would be jobs and multiple jobs coming to the area. I've not seen any jobs come to this area. All the work on the site was operated by people from out the area. So the council here objected to it, and the government overrid the council and let them go ahead, do what they did.
Yeah.
Just doing trials. And literally every week we had a situation where we were either having tremors or, on the odd occasion, some real loud bangs. I've spent time in Spain and I've experienced earthquakes, proper earthquakes. And as a comparison, we haven't experienced a proper earthquake here, which I admit to. But what people do forget is earthquakes don't travel for hundreds of yards. They travel for hundreds of miles. And we're an island at the end of the day, so we can travel anywhere.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you so much. I'm fascinated to hear your own view, given that you've had this fracking site, this Lancashire fracking site owned by Quadrilla, which is meant to have been cemented up now. But many, many people, including my last guest, Lois, saying that fracking is the answer, or one part of the answer to our energy crisis. We all know that our energy bills have doubled in many cases, going up yet again this October. We've got a very, very difficult winter ahead of us. I think many people, the penny hasn't even dropped yet quite how bad it's going to be. And so it really does have to be all hands on deck, doesn't it? Trying to sort out how to get cheaper energy sources, how to get cheaper petrol prices. We're going to be talking about that a bit later on in the show. Many, many problems that this inflation is causing. But next up, after the news, we're going to be talking about golf. Join us then.
I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'm a Talk TV presenter. The last tweet that I really liked was a guy on a petrol forecourt who tweeted, "I've just seen a guy on pump 3 fill up with £10 worth of petrol. Where's he driving to? Pump 4? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never miss a moment with Talk TV."
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. A Ukrainian MP says his country needs more weapons from the West because their current capability is limited in the onslaught of Russian aggression in the latest significant attack by Russian forces. Overnight shelling caused a fire at a chemical plant in Severodonetsk where hundreds of civilians are sheltering, according to the region's governor. The area in eastern Ukraine has become the focal point of Russia's efforts, with most of the city now said to be under Russian control. The government will bring forward legislation tomorrow that complies with the law to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol that governs trade following Brexit. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewin said the plans are lawful, but Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said today she couldn't understand how the changes would not breach international law. More than 400 protests have taken place across the United States to call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a number of mass shootings. 19 children and 2 adults were killed at Robb Elementary in Uvalde in Texas on the 24th of May, just days earlier in Buffalo, New York. Another 10 people were killed at a supermarket. US President Joe Biden backed the protests, but the chances of legal changes are likely to be quashed by Republicans. Protesters say mass shootings cannot be normalized.
I think we're reaching a tipping point where we're about to hit desensitization to gun violence. And I think that we're not there yet. And I think that this is going to be the amount of mass shootings that has happened. I think that if this trend continues and if we don't choose to take this opportunity to fight back, it's going to continue again. The cycle is going to continue.
And the Queen now holds another important title, the world's second longest reigning modern monarch. Her Majesty has overtaken a king in Thailand who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
The time is 32 minutes past 11 this Sunday morning. Daisy McAndrew here with you until 1 o'clock, keeping the seat warm for Richard Tice. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we, already today, talking about Prince Charles's comments, private comments he made about the Rwanda immigration policy. I can see that lots of you have been getting in touch with that. A few text messages. If you want to text, of course, you can just put the word talk on your text message and you can send it to the number 87222. That is exactly what David did, who said Prince Charles isn't stupid. He made the remarks knowing full well they would be made public. If he hadn't wanted his views known, he wouldn't have said. Prince Charles has always been controversial, and David says Prince William seems to be heading down the same path. Very nice message, saying that it's a nice surprise to see me on. Thank you very much. Flashy will get you everywhere. That was from G. Beaster. And Anna says we're all allowed an opinion. Lots of you have been getting in touch about Blackpool. This person, I don't think you've given me your name, talking about the call I just did with John in Blackpool, says John must never have lived next to a working quarry. When I was younger in the 70s, we lived with daily tremors when the local quarry would blast out the granite to build Britain's roads, which these NIMBYs enjoy travelling around on. And then another person, Steve, has said that John, who was talking about fracking not creating jobs, says, Steve says, if 1,000 people come from outside the area to work, they spend money in local businesses. That's why local areas died when pits closed. The local pubs, shops, barbers, etc. all closed. So he's saying, although the jobs might not have been provided at the fracking site for local people, for local Lancashire people, the effect of having that fracking site would have created money into the local economy. So keep those coming. Now, my attention has been turning to the very controversial golf tour, and I must admit, golf is not something I know anything about. I sometimes watch the very, very big tournaments when everybody else is talking about them just to see what all the fuss is about, but it is not an area of expertise. But this tour has piqued my interest. I want to know much more about it, and I reckon if I want to know more about it, you probably do too. And I'm delighted to say that Talk TV golf correspondent Rupert Bell joins me now. Very good morning to you, Rupert.
Good morning, Daisy.
Now, treat me like the total idiot I am when it comes to golf, please. Don't assume any knowledge whatsoever. So can you just explain why this tour is so controversial? What's going on?
Well, first of all, it's a tour that is funded by Saudi Arabian money, who have obviously put lots of money into Newcastle. There's the element of sports washing, but it's actually rattled the status quo within the golfing world. The Premier Tour is over in America, the PGA Tour, and they basically control and want to think that everyone aspires to be on their tour. Well, the amount of money that has been sloshing around Centurion Club this week and subsequently is eye-watering.
What sort of figures are we talking, Rupert?
OK, well, this tournament...
Make my eyes water.
Right, OK, here's your starter for 10, and I'm going to be raising you consistently like a poker hand here, because we start at $25 million for the first event played at Centurion. All events will be that amount.
Wow.
The winner gets $4 million. Plus, this week's winner also won the team competition, so Charles Fortsell walked away with $4.75 million.
Jeez.
Signing on fees for some players are reported to be in the regions of $150 million. That is allegedly what Phil Mickelson signed on. I'm raising you. I told you the money is eye-watering. $100 million is the reported signing on fee for Bryson DeChambeau and Patrick Reed and
that's
others.
Just for turning up?
That is just for turning up and signing on, because they're the big fish in the golfing world who will help to give it traction in the eyes of the sporting golfing public. Now, clearly, behind the scenes, there are a lot of other issues at play here, and clearly the golf tours are trying to work out what to do with it, because they see it as an invasion of their territory, which they've basically been able to dictate what goes on. Well, these people have come in with, as I say, just bucket loads of cash. There is probably, it just is eye-watering. To think that the player who finished 31 shots behind the winner at Centurion yesterday still managed to walk off the course with $120,000 in his pocket for playing as badly as he did, for whatever reason. So therefore...
So, from your point of view as a fan and an observer, was it worth watching? Was it a decent? Is it a decent output?
That is the interesting thing. It wasn't bad, but unfortunately, it's the first time I went. I love my sport, as people know, whether it be racing or whatever, and all sports actually. But I go to an event thinking, do I care about the result? If I'm going to the final day of the Open Championship, I sort of care. I'm going to Ascot this week. I will care about the result in the Ascot Gold Cup. I went because of all the sideshow, I went to the final round yesterday wondering, do I actually care who's winning? Now, it's a new tour, so there's no history behind it. But clearly, what they are thinking, and it is causing problems, particularly for the European stroke, what it's called the DP World Tour. They do not have a lot of money and are entirely dependent not only on Middle East backers, not Saudi backers, but the Ryder Cup as their big cash cow. The problem is this is easily going to turn a lot of the players' heads. And whatever you may think of the moral issues of dealing with Saudi Arabia and all the background to that, clearly a player thinking, oh, right, 3 days' work instead of 4, and I'm going to walk away with more money. Richard Bland, for instance, won last year's British Masters. He won, I think, $330,000. Just for his position in the team competition yesterday, he won $375,000. So, and he's at 49, so he's thinking, goodness me, I'm doing less, and I'm getting paid ridiculous amounts of money. And it will work, I think, because what will happen is the various tours around the world will have to make a compromise. First up, the European Tour, and what I'm led to believe, certain senior officials were seen at Centurion during the week, sort of sussing out the lay of the land, whether talking to some of the leading players to find talk to them, and just see what they need to do. And I'm pretty convinced there will be a compromise along the way, whilst there could be legal issues from some of the players taking on the PGA Tour. It's a mess.
What are the legal issues, Rupert?
Well, some players have been suspended from playing on the PGA Tour so they cannot now go and play in events in America or wherever the PGA Tour play. One of those players is Ian Poulter, Mr. Ryder Cup, as far as Europe is concerned. Now, he said, after he got the email on when did we start? Thursday. There was an email that went round to all members of the PGA Tour, including those who are playing in Centurion, saying that you are now suspended from playing on the PGA Tour. Well, Ian Poulter's reaction is, I've been able to play golf wherever I want around the world. Now I can't. So he is saying, well, it will be legal. So what will happen now is there will be a court of, be lawyers getting ready to just hoover up yet more of the cash.
Exactly.
And then they'll probably be able to, while the due court process, continue to play. And then eventually there will be a compromise as more and more big names sign up. And someone like Bryson DeChambeau is box office, whether you like him or not.
Rupert, I still have loads more questions, but I've run out of time. But thank you so much, and you're right, those figures are truly eye-watering. Quite extraordinary stuff. Rupert Bell, many thanks. Well, welcome back. You could hear me there chatting away to my next guest. I'm very excited that Steve Denny has joined me in the studio to bring me up to date on everything showbiz land.
Hello.
Very, very delighted to have you. Obviously, you're a Virgin radio presenter, our sister station just down the corridor.
Yes.
What is going on in your showbiz world?
Lots happening tonight. I mean, we've Billie Eilish is back at the O2 a bit later on, and I've just got off the phone to somebody who was there last night because she she stopped the show halfway through because she said that people were fainting, they were passing out. Apparently the temperature inside London's O2 was so hot. But I was just looking at a couple of friends who were there last night and their video footage. See, some shows, I don't know if you've been at the O2 before.
I accompanied my teenage daughter to a Shawn Mendes concert at the O2, which you can imagine was full of screaming teens. And actually, and my daughter was also a huge Billie Eilish fan. I'd never heard of her until my daughter started going on about her. And I seem to remember I once queued. She had one of these pop-up merch stores open in Camden Market in North London. And I went with my teenage daughters a few years ago, and we must have queued for 4 hours to get hold of a massively overpriced sweatshirt that had some Billie Eilish logo on it. Yeah.
At least you got in there. That's good.
We
4
did,
hours.
finally, yeah.
See, some shows, I mean, when I went to see Genesis, they just have seating out, and it was a very kind of middle-aged, relaxed affair. Last night at Billie Eilish, not so much. Like, all the fans are packed in. They actually had a catwalk. But she's quite famous, actually, for stopping shows and looking after people. If she sees somebody in distress or whatever. She did it in New York, in Atlanta last night.
So did she stop and restart, or just stop
she stopped in the middle of a song and said, look, you guys need to kind of move back, because they were all kind of crowded around. You pay extra money if you're going to be stood right next to in the pit, yeah. And I think the problem is, like, certain artists say we want it hotter because of their vocals and what have you. So the O2 is actually really great. When I've been there before, it's almost been a little bit chilly because of the air conditioning. Yeah. But I suppose if you're right at the front and the artist insists on having it boiling hot. I know Madonna's a stickler for this. She always has the temperature really, really hot so that she can sing better.
So that's all to do with the voice. It's not because they like everyone to be sweaty.
No, I don't think so, because the O2's usually quite air-conned.
Right.
Like, you can almost feel it in your hair. So it's interesting that she did this last night. She's back on this evening, so if you're going to see it tonight, it might be a bit cooler.
Don't worry, it's not going to be...
She'll look after you. She's like the mum.
Cancelled.
Also, all vegan food everywhere in the O2. So a friend went last night. There's no hot dogs or burgers or anything.
Well, that's not going to go down well.
I don't think I'll enjoy that. I'll stick to Genesis.
Yeah, exactly. And is Billie Eilish still as big as she was?
Oh, she is absolutely huge. She's the hot ticket. I would say her and Harry Styles are the people.
But I think Harry Styles, certainly in this country, is much more of a household name, isn't he, than Billie Eilish? And is she still writing with her brother? She always used to. It was very much a family affair. Wasn't it,
absolutely.
With
She's now got a few albums under her belt, so it's great to see the set list. Actually, I won't know spoilers, but it really is like a greatest hit show. So you're in for a real treat. It's the hottest ticket this weekend.
Sharon Watts from EastEnders, of course, played by Letitia Dean.
So there was a British Soap Awards last night. So do you remember, Daisy? I mean, it's unbelievable to think about this, because she's been in EastEnders for 40 years, and the most watched episode was in 1986 Christmas Day. It got 30.1
Did it?
million
Well, I would have been one of those viewers, because I would have been 14, and I was very into EastEnders, probably until my mid-20s, and then I sort of drifted, and I never really came back to it. But I mean, I would, because was it on every night of the week? No, three nights a week, was it?
Twice to begin with, then it went up to 3 times, and then do you remember they used to put that Sunday omnibus, which was about 6 hours long? It was the whole of Sunday.
And sometimes I would have watched all the weeknight shows, and then I'd watch them all again on a Saturday.
But it was real appointment to watch viewing, wasn't it? And we don't really have that anymore. So it was good to see Letitia on stage. She shared that her father passed away a couple of weeks ago, but she took to the stage with Angie Watts. So to see the two of them, because they were the really big, heavy-hitting stars, weren't they, in the 80s, when you had the Dirty Den storyline.
Was it Angie that had the poodle?
Wasn't it? I can't remember.
The giant poodle. I bet a viewer or listener can tell me what was it a giant poodle? I can't remember. I just remember there was always a dog. So you can drop me a text or a tweet, and
we'll find out very soon.
Apparently it's Den and Angie. Aaron saying, "Well, thank you very much." I want to know what the dog's name was. And George Michael.
Yeah, so George Michael, before he passed away, he started on this project. He wanted to make a movie about his life with people who knew him, and then obviously he did pass away, and it was put on hold. It's funny, comes out at the end of this week. So this is the official film. There's people like Elton John in this movie talking about him, his music, his life, his influence. But there's also a book that comes out in 2 weeks' time, and this is written by a journalist called James Gavin, who's spoken to 200 people. That creates a very different different picture to the movie. So the movie's kind of a celebration of his lifetime works. The book is saying that he actually passed away, like quite a solitary, sad figure. It said, you know, addicted to drugs. He really wasn't having a good time. Do you remember he passed away in that year when
Christmas
we had
Day, wasn't
so
it?
many celebrity deaths?
Yeah,
and then the final one really of that year was Christmas Day. Yeah, it was George Michael dying, passing away that evening.
So shocked by his death. I don't know. Of course, journalists are going to write these stories, and if they've talked to 200 people, then hopefully they're getting, you know, the true picture. But you don't know how close those people really were to him, or how upset his family and friends will be by this book, written posthumously.
Yeah, I think there's no question that he was quite a tortured soul. It's interesting, we've just started Virgin Radio Pride again, and we're interviewing lots of musicians and people talking about, you know, the big kind of pivotal characters in their life. And lots of people say George Michael, but he was, you know, he couldn't come out.
Yes.
There was...
And was that because of his relationship with his mother, or was it more
I think it was more with his father.
Oh, with his father,
I mean,
right.
you never know, because this is all hearsay, but he did have a very kind of... He didn't really have an upbringing, because he shot to fame so young, and then all those decades later, he still hadn't really, like, properly addressed what was going on. He seemed to be kind of tortured. I interviewed him, I think, about...
I was just about to ask
10 years
if you'd
ago.
met him.
And we were doing a Madonna documentary, and he was great, and he came in the studio, and he was lovely, and he was funny, but I just thought he just seemed kind of... you know, a bit dead behind the eyes, I thought, and a little bit... I just felt quite sorry for him. He seemed, you know, a shadow of his former character.
And he brought so much, you know, pleasure and joy to all his fans' lives, and it's so heartbreaking to think that he was unfulfilled or unhappy or lonely.
Yeah, and, you know, obviously he's not here anymore, so it's all speculative, but both projects very, very interesting in their own ways.
Yeah. And Queen and Adam Lambert are up to something.
Yes. Did you ever see Freddie and Queen? Or
I
did.
Didn't.
Oh, you did?
I did. As a teenager, I saw Freddie Mercury and Queen at... on holiday in France in a Roman amphitheatre, and I was really near the front. It was the most extraordinary. We got, like, last minute, we were on holiday, we found out this concert was happening, and we got tickets, like last minute tickets. And I don't know if maybe Queen wasn't that big in France, or how we managed to get the tickets, but it was such a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
I can imagine. I mean, you saw Freddie.
Yeah.
Wow, OK,
Yeah.
I'll bow down to you. Adam Lambert, though, I mean, it's very, very brave to do this, because there's only, like, a couple of the members of the original Queen lineup in this show. But literally, for 2 decades, I haven't read a bad review since Adam Lambert joined Queen. He's doing Birmingham a bit later on.
And he, of course, was
evening.
amazing at the Jubilee.
Yeah, so
And
that was a snapshot of the show.
Yeah.
Exactly. The energy and the vocals. They do this really nice bit. This is not a spoiler alert, people know about this, where Freddie does pop up as a hologram and sings part of the show.
That's amazing.
But they seem to have got the perfect person to continue the Queen legacy, and all these years later...
And am I right in thinking... Sorry to interrupt you. Am I right in thinking that Adam Lambert was a reality TV winner?
Yeah, absolutely. He was kind of like a, you know, the equivalent to our X Factor in the States. He was a massive star in that, and he's really paved the way. You know, like, we go back to, you know, he came out and he's never made a big thing about him and his sexuality and stuff, and now he's within Queen. I mean, he's got his own career going on as well, but this is just a lovely kind of, you know, other part to what's going on.
Can you imagine that almost your sort of hobby, as you said, you know, the other bit of your career allows you to open, you know, the Platinum Jubilee celebrations in which you're following on from the Queen and Paddington Bear, who are tapping along to your music. I mean, that's
incredible, isn't it?
Quite a thing to be able to, you know, to tell your friends and family, oh, guess what I did at the weekend?
Yeah. And they do it so well, and obviously Queen fans are very loyal to Freddie, but as I said, there's been absolutely no backlash at all about this current guise of Queen, and everyone said this is the perfect kind of, you know, almost like second chapter of their existence.
And I've got a few seconds. Anything good on the box tonight?
Well, you know, being a bit of a geek, a train geek, there's a documentary on tonight following the Elizabeth line, and this is a long laboured documentary. This is kind of part 4. They've been following the Elizabeth line since 2018. Of course, it's finally open now.
Finally open.
And the Queen opened it a couple couple of weeks ago. Still parts of it are not open. So it's just interesting to see its progress.
For
and they show you how things work behind the scenes. I'll be watching it. I'm sad, I know, but I love it.
Any fellow nerdy train geeks, that's one to watch tonight. The £15 billion railway. Steve Deniet, thank you so much.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon, I'm Nadira Tudor. Legislation changing parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol will be laid before Parliament tomorrow. The protocol governs Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said the plans are lawful, but Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said today she couldn't understand how the changes would not breach international law. The Ukrainian MP says his country needs more weapons from the West because their current capability is limited in the onslaught of Russian aggression. In the latest significant attack by Russian forces, overnight shelling caused a fire at a chemical plant in Severodonetsk, where hundreds of civilians are sheltering, according to the region's governor. The area in eastern Ukraine has become the focal point of Russia's efforts, with most of the city now said to be under Russian control. More than 400 protests have taken place across the United States to call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a number of mass shootings. 19 children and 2 adults were killed at Robb Elementary in Uvalde in Texas on the 24th of May. Just days earlier in Buffalo, New York, another 10 people were killed at a supermarket. US President Joe Biden backed the protests, but the chances of legal change are likely to be quashed by Republicans. Protesters say mass shootings cannot be normalized.
I think we're reaching a tipping point where we're about to hit desensitization to gun violence. And I think that we're not there yet. And I think that this is going to be the amount of mass shootings that has happened. I think that if this trend continues and if we don't choose to take this opportunity to fight back, it's going to continue again. The cycle is going to continue.
The government's looking into repealing a legal ban that prevents agency staff filling in for striking workers. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph a potential change in legislation could allow companies to hire temporary workers to cover some roles and prevent disruption. But any intervention would not affect the rail strikes across the country later this month. Transport editor for the Daily Mail, David Churchill, says agency staff will only help to a certain point.
Unfortunately, they won't be able to cover some of the skilled jobs like signalling, train drivers, things like that are quite skilled jobs. And unfortunately, it'll only go so far in limiting the chaos.
Police in the American state of Idaho have arrested 31 members of a white supremacist group and charged them with conspiracy to riot at a Pride event. Police say they were tipped off by a local resident who had spotted the men with masks and shields getting into a lorry. The men were members of the Patriot Front group. And the Queen now holds another important title, the world's second longest reigning modern monarch. Her Majesty's overtaken a king in Thailand who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your Talk Sport update. But first, your weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
It's generally a fine afternoon across the UK, though there are still scattered showers affecting parts of the north and west. However, this afternoon will be dry for many with sunny spells. There are still some scattered showers around for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but these will become lighter and less frequent throughout this afternoon. Winds will continue to ease also, though it may still be breezy for a time over the highest ground. Now, moving southwards to Wales and central parts of England, a few light showers linger across the high ground of northern Wales, but these will fade away, though, this afternoon. Elsewhere, it will be dry with sunny spells. For the rest of England and the Channel Isles, it will be a dry afternoon with plenty of sunshine, feeling pleasant here in the sunshine. Showers will ease further this evening to leave a dry night with clear spells for most.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Hello again. Here are your sport headlines. And England have surpassed the 100 mark on day 3 of the second test. The team has made a good start at Trent Bridge as they fight back and try to reduce New Zealand's sizable advantage after they closed on innings of 553 yesterday. Gareth Southgate says he understands criticism aimed at England for their lack of goals in the Nations League. Last night's goalless draw with Italy made it 3 games without scoring from open play. England will attempt to correct their form when they host Hungary at Wembley on Tuesday night. The match is live on Talk Sport. Britain's Daniel Dubois has won the WBA regular heavyweight title with a knockout performance against American Trevor Bryan. Dubois won in the 4th round in Miami to become the mandatory challenger of the winner of the AJ versus Usyk rematch, which TalkSport has been told will take place in the Middle East later this summer. That's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
The biggest issue in Britain right now is the cost of living crisis. Energy bills have become ridiculous. Second biggest issue, extraordinarily, is nobody can define what a woman is.
Well, a very, very good afternoon to you. The time is 5 minutes past 12. This is Daisy McAndrew. I have been sitting in this morning and going on to 1 o'clock this afternoon for Richard Tice, and having a very, very good morning doing so. And I want to say a very big thank you to all of you who've been messaging, phoning, texting, tweeting, and really giving me all your opinions about the big array of stories we've been talking about. But I think the story we've talked about most and are continuing to talk about now is the government's policy of sending migrants or asylum seekers to Rwanda. We know that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, recently won her case. Of course, that case, I think, will come back into the courts of whether or not she has the authority to pursue this policy. Of course, the Home Secretary and the Home Office have been saying that there are 2 elements of this policy. One, they want it to be a deterrent to stop people taking that very dangerous crossing across the Channel, using people smugglers and so on to get to Britain's beaches and claim asylum when they arrive here. And so there's the deterrent element where they're hoping to see a reduction in those numbers coming over. And then, of course, the sort of practical nature where they say, that flying hundreds or thousands of asylum seekers or migrants or immigrants to Rwanda is a sort of we scratch their back, they scratch our back with the Rwandans, whereby and we get rid of a problem. My personal point of view is that it's not a practical solution to the problem. I think there is a problem with border control. There definitely is a problem with people taking these very, very dangerous journeys. There's a political problem where the public wants to see the government do something and take control and look like they know what they're doing and have practical solutions. But my personal view is that this solution is a bad solution because I think it's going to end up in the courts rather than actually making a difference to the immigration issue. Where I fall down on is I don't know what the answer to the problem is. So it's lucky I'm not an elected politician, but I would love to know what you think is the answer. Do you think this Rwanda policy is the answer? What do you think the answer is? I mean, I suspect that the proper answer to this problem is more cooperation with the French. And it doesn't look like the French want to cooperate with us and we don't want to cooperate with them. So we're stuck in this sort of limbo land. But you can give me a ring. The number is 0344 499 1000. Tell me what your solution would be. Are you fully behind the Rwanda solution? Do you have another idea? Or do you think that actually we should be welcoming immigrants here? David Mellor was saying to me earlier, wasn't he, that we have a serious issue with lack of workforce. That is definitely the case. A lot of businesses are struggling at the moment because they simply cannot fill the vacancies. Now, whether or not those vacancies have been caused by Brexit or whether those vacancies have been caused by the pandemic and people leaving jobs or perhaps being furloughed out of jobs and then not returning to those jobs, nobody's quite sure. It's very difficult to prove, but certainly we do have a workforce issue. So lots of things to get our teeth stuck into in this issue, in this topic, and I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Tatchell, of course, a famous human rights campaigner, LGBTQ campaigner. But on this issue, Peter, this is very much your human rights hat, I'm guessing, you're wearing today.
Well, absolutely. Let me start by saying you're absolutely right that the purpose of the Rwanda asylum plan was to reduce the numbers crossing the channel. But it has not worked. The people are still coming because they're desperate, mostly fleeing conflict, war and persecution in other countries. So the plan has not worked. Secondly, Rwanda is a most unsuitable place. First of all, Rwanda has, until now, at the most accepted 300 refugees in 1 year. Normally it's less than 100, but the most they've ever accepted in 1 year is 300. The government is proposing to send thousands or tens of thousands of people to Rwanda. That simply will not work. Rwanda does not have the infrastructure to cope with those numbers. And the third point I'd raise is that some of these people who are being sent to Rwanda, for example, next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, are people who should be getting asylum here. One of them is a senior Iranian police officer who refused to shoot dead peaceful protesters. He was about to be arrested and jailed for 5 years, and he escaped to Britain to seek asylum. But Priti Patel wants to send him to Rwanda. Now, this man, in my view, is a hero, a human rights hero who refused to kill people who are peacefully protesting.
That's very
he should be given asylum. He should be given asylum.
It's very interesting, the details of it. Do we know how that Iranian former police officer got into the UK? How he physically got here?
He had to travel all across Europe and eventually, I think, came across the Channel. But I believe that he has contacts, friends in this country, which is why he chose Britain.
Yeah. Peter, just going back from the details of the Rwanda policy, which I do want to talk to you about, but to the wider issue of immigration, do you agree with my general premise that immigration is an issue that politicians of all political parties need to get a grip on, partly because there is an issue with people smuggling, there is an issue with the dangerous transportation of people across the Channel, but also partly because it's what the public wants?
Well, a recent poll of the public asked them what are the issues that concerned you. Immigration hardly figured at all. People were concerned about the cost of living crisis, the state of the National Health Service, and umpteen other issues. So it was quite low down. But the other issue is, of course, people are only using people smugglers, they're only crossing the Channel because safe legal routes have been almost entirely closed. And that's really the big issue. We should reopen the safe, secure routes so that people don't have to rely on people smugglers and don't make that dangerous crossing. That's the way forward. And then, as you say, many of these people have the skills that we need. Some of the people I'm dealing with, they are refugees who are doctors, plumbers, carpenters, farmers, a whole range of different skills that actually Britain needs. And you've correctly pointed out, we have a skills and job shortage right now. Businesses cannot get the workforce. These refugees could fill that void and help our economy.
But if we were going to do that, if we were going to see immigration as a way to boost the workforce, then you do need some sort of points-based immigration system where you are searching out the type of people with the type of qualifications you want, rather than just anybody.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But again, I'll give you another example. I was contacted recently by a person who's under risk of being killed in Russia because of his political campaigning, including against Russia's war in Ukraine. He has had death threats. Now, he is a skilled farmer. He's farmed land and has the skills to do farming. And we know that there are farmers all over Britain crying out for labour and people with farming experience to grow the crops we need to make us food independent so we don't have to rely on other countries. And of course, homegrown food, that is much better than boosting up our import bill, having to get food from abroad.
Actually, funnily enough, I was reading in one of the papers today about a policy that the government is thinking about putting forward, where they will insist that big public sector institutions like possibly hospitals and schools should only buy homegrown food. Because the problem with that is very often, ironically, or maybe that's not quite the right word, but homegrown food can be more expensive than food that's flown thousands of miles across the planet, which doesn't make sense, but that often is the case.
Well, you're absolutely right, but also the government's proposed new laws and policies on farming are actually going to drive many farmers out of business. So the government is saying that it wants food security and independence, so we don't rely on these imports, but it's actually making life harder for farmers with its new farming policy, and many are going to have to leave farming because they will not be able to sustain themselves with a decent income.
Although I think
the government's policy is not thought out.
No, although many farmers celebrating it, it looks like there's going to be a big U-turn on Boris Johnson's plans to push forward rewilding in a lot of areas. That seems to be being quietly forgotten about, which I think farmers will be very pleased about. Just coming back to the Rwanda issue, we've only got a couple of minutes, Peter, but I'd love your views on Prince Charles and whether he's got himself in a certain amount of hot water for seemingly, albeit in private, but his private comments have been made public and haven't been denied, so I think we can assume that he did make them, where he seemed to be saying that the Rwanda policy was appalling.
Well, I think from a human rights perspective, Prince Charles is entitled to hold and express views in private, but that is where they should stay. And I think the culprits here are the people who leaked the conversations to the media. Of course, it is very important that the head of state is seen to be neutral. And really, at the end of the day, we know that Prince Charles has a lot of strong opinions on a lot of subjects, some of which I agree with and some of which I disagree with. But if he wants to be able to express his opinions freely and publicly, then I think he has to submit himself, along with others, to election as our head of state. I support a republic. I would like to remove the monarch as the head of state via the hereditary principle. I would like to see a head of state that's elected by and accountable to the British people.
And Peter, is that why you refused to be a national treasure? I believe you were invited to be a national treasure on one of the pageant open-top buses, but you said thanks but no thanks.
Yeah, to me, monarchy represents elitism, privilege and deference. I don't think it's compatible with a modern democracy. I'm not saying anything against the royals personally, but the institution they represent is from the feudal era hundreds of years ago. It's not compatible with modern Britain today.
Well, Peter Tatchell, thank you so much. We covered a lot of ground there. Who knew we'd end up talking about farming and goodness knows what else? But Peter Tatchell clearly has very strong opinions on the Rwanda policy, also very strong opinions on the royal family. He turned down the opportunity to be one of those national treasures on top of the open-top buses. So if anything Peter has said has annoyed you, or if you've agreed with him, keep your comments coming. You can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Well, I've had great fun so far since 10 o'clock. I've been sitting in for Richard Tice. This is Daisy McAndrew on Talk TV. And, of course, we are broadcasting to you from the Talk Radio studios, the home of common sense as you know it. Now, I spotted a story in the papers, was quite a few days ago now, it might have even been a few weeks ago, which really struck a chord with me. Now, we all know that we're going through a cost of living crisis, and we know that people are having to make really difficult decisions about what to spend their money on when money is very, very tight. We know that petrol has hit £100 for an average refill for an average car. We know that energy bills are going up. We know that your supermarket shop is incredibly expensive. But what we tend not to think about is what all the knock-on impacts of the cost of living crisis are, of the squeeze on family incomes. And, of course, also how they affect children, and how when children know that money's tight, it affects their lives. It affects what they feel they can ask their parents for. And I was just looking at a story in today's newspaper talking about uniform banks. So it's interesting. It's only a small story, but it's saying the government is being urged to force schools to adopt uniform banks to help struggling families through the cost of living crisis. Because, of course, we all know how outrageously expensive some school uniforms are, and people who are struggling to pay their bills never want to send their kids to school looking like, looking scruffy, wearing shoes that are too small or clothes that are too small. And I think we can understand that. But of course there are lots of things that children don't feel they can ask their parents for, that perhaps their parents don't even know what's going on. And there was, as I said, a story in the paper that I have been thinking about a lot. It had an impact. And I'm delighted to say that I've got a history teacher at St Peter's Catholic School in Solihull, Stephanie Lakin, on the line, who can explain what the story was. Stephanie, thank you so much for talking to me on Talk TV today.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Daisy, for having me on. And just what you were saying, actually, about uniforms. One of the boys that I supported this week had to get 2 jobs last summer to pay for his own school uniform. So it is a real need out there for the government to do something about uniform banks.
It's a real need. And if also, if you've got views at home and you're listening to this on how parents struggle to buy school uniforms or so on, do get in touch, send me a text or a tweet. But Stephanie, pick up your story, because I haven't told people what it's all about deliberately, because I wanted you to tell us what was the problem that you saw at your school and what was the solution you came up with?
Yeah, so I have been at my school for a few years now, so I know my students pretty well. And there was one girl, we were just talking in a year 11 class about who was going to prom and who wasn't going to prom. And there was this girl who said she wasn't going to go to the school prom. And it just struck a chord with me, because I knew this girl really, really well. And I kind of said, "Oh, are your friends going?" I went through her friends, and she said, "Oh, yes, they're going." And so I just kind of took her to one side when we had some time that we could speak. And I just kind of felt that it was because of the barrier of getting a prom dress was the reason why. I knew that she really wanted to go because all her friends were going. It just didn't sit right with me. So I just spoke to her and I just said, if I could get you a prom dress, would you want to go to the ball, basically? Would you want to go to prom if I could get you a prom dress, if I could source one? And I said, have a think about it, have a week to think about it. So she went off and then she came back to find me and she said, "Do you know what, miss? I would really love if you could get me a prom dress, because it is really the reason why I'm thinking that I can't go to the prom this year." So it really started there with this girl, and then I just kind of put the ask around at school, and then this wonderful girl called Brooke, one of my colleagues, spotted that she was offering to give her prom dress away for free. And so we got that prom dress for my girl. It fitted perfectly. And it just made me think, I bet there must be other girls out there that really desperately want to go to the prom, but are aware, as you said, of their family's financial situations, don't want to ask their parents if they could go because they know what the answer might be, or they've already made a decision that they can't go because they can't afford the dress and the prom.
And Stephanie, that was one of the things that struck me most, where you said that it wasn't that the parents had said to the children, we can't afford to buy you a dress. It was that the children were predicting that the parents would struggle with the cost of the dress, and they didn't want to ask their parents. They didn't want to put that burden on their parents. That made me so sad.
Yeah, it's true, yeah, because, you know, we're talking about 15, 16-year-olds are very sensitive to their family life. So, yeah, that one person actually emailed me and said this resonated with her because she knew her parents couldn't afford to pay for her prom dress, purposely misbehaved so she wasn't allowed to go to the prom, so that it took it out the equation completely.
And we sometimes underestimate teenagers, don't we? That they're thinking about how much things cost, and they understand that their parents have got, you know, tight financial circumstances, and they're trying to do their bit. But that story about somebody deliberately getting into detention or trouble, whatever, so that they would be punished and not be able to go to the prom, rather than embarrassing their parents about money. I mean, I guess some people would say, why can't these, you know, kids just wear hand-me-down clothes or wear clothes that they've had a bit? But going to the prom, it is a big deal for teenagers, isn't it? And they all want to go wearing new frocks. And so you've set up this, what is it, a sort of database or a sort of exchange of frocks?
Yeah, so Madrina is they're donated outfits, because it struck me that these girls, and their suits as well that have been donated as well for boys, that there are these outfits that some people, I mean, I'm guilty of this, I've got to admit, I've bought an outfit, I've never worn it, it's hanging in my wardrobe, it's still got the price tags on, and I just thought, I bet there are dresses hanging in wardrobes that these girls could wear, or have been worn once, like just worn once for a prom or an event. And so I just put the ask out really on a Facebook kind of community page and just said, has anyone got any dresses that they could perhaps donate or were willing to donate? And the response was really, really amazing. And like I said, these dresses are dresses that have either been worn once or not even worn, still have price tags on. I got in touch with some prom dress shops locally as well, sent them emails to see if they had any stock that they would be willing to donate. And this beautiful lady in Yardley, Anna Louise Gowns, donated 50 dresses.
Wow.
Yeah, I was overwhelmed. And again, not worn. So there are prom dresses out there that these students, these girls, can wear, which will allow them to go to, and it's inclusive then for everyone, that they're not being able to go because of their, you know, financial
circumstances.
Yeah.
And Stephanie, when is the next prom? It must be very soon, or has it just happened?
Oh, some have started. A majority are starting kind of after the GCSEs finish. So a lot are starting kind of end of June. I think the first one is one of my people that I've helped. I think it was 29th of June. And then it's kind of literally every week after that, yeah. Wonderful.
Well, Stephanie, I just want to say congratulations on what you've done and what you've achieved, and also getting those donations from local businesses. Such a lovely story. Stephanie Lagan, thank you so much. And obviously it's a story that has a very sad edge, all these children worrying about their parents' financial situations, and we know this is going to get worse, and we know that poverty or low incomes really affect children, not just on what they can and can't have, but on their attitudes and their relationships with their parents. So lovely there that Stephanie's able to make such a difference, and enjoy the prom to anybody listening. I have a 16-year-old who's doing GCSEs at the moment, so I know what you're all going through. We'll be back in just a minute.
I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'm a Talk TV presenter. The last tweet that I really liked was a guy on a petrol forecourt who tweeted, "I've just seen a guy on pump 3 fill up with £10 worth of petrol. Where's he driving to? Pump 4? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never miss a moment with Talk TV."
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Nadira Tudor. Legislation changing parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol will be laid before Parliament tomorrow. The protocol governs Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said the plans are lawful, but Sinn Féin President Mary Lou McDonald said today she couldn't understand how the changes would not breach international law. A Ukrainian MP says his country needs more weapons from the West because their current capability is limited in the onslaught of Russian aggression. In the latest significant attack by Russian forces, overnight shelling caused a fire at a chemical plant in Severodonetsk, where hundreds of civilians are sheltering. The area in eastern Ukraine has become the focal point of Russia's efforts, with most of the city now said to be under Russian control. More than 400 protests have taken place across the United States to call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a number of mass shootings. 19 children and 2 adults were killed at Robb Elementary in Uvalde in Texas on the 24th of May. Just days earlier in Buffalo, New York, another 10 people were killed at a supermarket. US President Joe Biden backed the protest, but the chances of legal change are likely to be squashed by Republicans. The government's looking into repealing a legal ban that prevents agency staff filling in for striking workers. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph a potential change in legislation could allow companies to hire temporary workers to cover some roles and prevent disruption. But any intervention would not affect the rail strikes across the country later this month. And the Queen now holds another important title, the world's second longest reigning modern monarch. Her Majesty's overtaken a king in Thailand who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Well, the time is 32 minutes past 12 o'clock, which means that we're in the final furlong of this show. Daisy McAndrew here, sitting in for Richard Tice, and I'll be with you until 1 o'clock. Just looking at some of the calls and tweets and texts. I'm delighted you've sent so many about immigration and the chat that I was having with Peter Tatchell, and some about the chat I was just having with Stephanie, the history teacher, who set up this database of donated prom dresses for, well, started off girls, but girls and boys who perhaps family don't have the money to buy dresses, although somebody has just, Sue in Sussex has just said, when my daughter went to her prom, all the girls hired their dresses, says Sue, which I think is also a very good point. But of course you still have to pay to hire a dress, and I think Stephanie's, some of the girls that she was originally talking about wouldn't have even felt able to have paid for the hire charge. Well, let's go to the calls. Sandra in Suffolk.
Oh, hello, Daisy. Yes, I have a bit of a beef about this headmistress calling her pupils children.
Yes, she's so just in case anybody missed this, we were talking about this earlier on in the show, there's a headmistress at an all-girls school, and that is important. I suspect she probably doesn't call herself headmistress, she probably calls herself head or something like that, who is trying not to use the word girls when she's talking about her pupils, and when she's writing to parents about their daughters, she's trying to say, XX, your child, not daughter. It seems ridiculous.
Well, this is fraught with problems, isn't it? First of all, by the way, the current title for headmistress or headmaster in many schools when I was teaching was the head teacher.
Yeah.
Which was the start of it all, probably. Anyway, this business of calling pupils by the name of child, if it's in the primary school, you might well get away with it to a certain extent because they're young and they don't attach too much to what teachers call them, really. But when you get into the secondary sector, it's a whole different ballgame. No 12 or say 13, 14 and 15-year-old, where they're all up the revolution at that age, they're going to be very, very upset at being called a child. What does the teacher in morning assembly say? Good morning, children, to a 15-year-old?
Yes, you're quite right. I hadn't thought about the sort of infantilization element of it. I was thinking more about, the sort of gender neutral and the PC element. But of course, you're quite right. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I think if they were called, children and child,
not impressed, are they?
No, they sort of think of themselves as teenagers or young adults.
They're going to change the world. So the world, word children to them is just going to be an anathema.
Yeah.
The other problem is, what do parents say about this? Do parents agree that their teachers would call their children just as a child? I mean, it doesn't really hang right, does it? This has got...
And also, we know that if this was an all-boys school, the head teacher or headmaster or headmistress of that school wouldn't be giving it a second thought. It's not an issue, you know, in that school. So the fact that it's girls, for it be them, who are going to, you know, who are going to have their terms changed from being called girls, excuse me, to children, it is doubly insulting. I mean, having said that, of course, we do know a lot of teenagers are woke warriors, and certainly mine are, and an awful lot are. So they might approve of the gender side of it, but I think you're right. I don't think they're going to approve of being called children.
I think your children will probably start to change their mind when they have to pay bills. When they've got a mortgage and they've got the electricity to find, they might find that some of their prevailing thoughts might go into...
Well, I think that's right. And also, I suspect that both of them, when they start... And certainly they already said to me off their own bats a while ago. Funny enough, my son asked me, we were driving, you know how you have those great conversations in the car sometimes with children, really good chats, and he suddenly said, out of absolutely nowhere, Mum, what do you think about trans athletes competing in all-female competitions? You know, meaning, obviously, trans women who were once men. And I said, I really disapprove of it. I think it's dangerous. I said, on the whole, you know, I'm as pro-trans as anybody, but in this area, I think it's very dangerous. And he said, yes, I've been thinking about it too, and I really disagree. And I said, imagine if your sister was competing in a boxing match, and when we found out that her competitor, you know, was born a man, we'd be really worried. And he said, yes, I think so. But I'm not sure he said that to any of his friends.
No.
Because he probably knows the reaction he'd get.
Well, things have changed so much, because my own children, I'm pretty sure, if you mention the word trans something in relation to sport, they probably would have thought it was a kind of a bicycle or something bearing on that, you know. But things have changed dramatically. Can I just make one more comment?
Of course.
On the uniform?
Yes,
shops and
the uniform banks and trying to help.
This is not new at all. When I was at school in the 1950s, well, at the end of the war, into the 1950s, there was tremendous real poverty then, as you can imagine.
Post-war poverty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just about every school that I attended and that I knew about had their own school shop. Every Friday afternoon at the end of school, it was open for parents or anybody to come in and to purchase items of clothing that pupils had grown out of and that still got wear. And what would happen, it would all be there, hanging up on rails, they could choose, and whatever they paid for it, 10% went to the school. So the schools won as well. It was a win-win situation.
And this was second-hand uniform?
Yes. Second-hand uniforms, because children grow so fast. You know, you can have very, very little wear, say a blazer or anything. The other thing was, too, also, many towns and cities had second-hand shops which sold uniforms from all the schools in their area. And you could go and buy.
But I think a lot of those shops aren't around now, and I think part of it is greed. You know, people... If you're selling school uniform, you have an absolute captive market that has to buy your product, and you can charge whatever you want for it. And I mean, obviously, some schools have very basic uniform, and they try to keep the cost down, and you can buy certain elements of it in a supermarket. You know, if it's a basic pair of black trousers, but some schools have crazy uniforms, and you have to buy the blazer with the special badge and the right trousers, and this can go into hundreds of pounds.
Absolutely. My first secondary school uniform cost my parents nearly £200, which was a lot of money.
That would be thousands now.
Yes.
Yeah,
so, you know, as I say, this was one of the reasons why they had the shops.
And you know, one of the other things about children and, you know, living in poverty or living, you know, on the breadline, so many elements we don't think about. I was listening to an absolutely heartbreaking interview recently with a celebrity who was saying that they had grown up very, very poor, and the thing that had affected them most throughout their adulthood was constantly being told at school that they were smelly. And there's a real issue with poverty and families not being able to afford basic, basic issues like buying deodorants and buying sort of soap and shampoos and stuff. And that was something that I was aware of. Sandra, we're going to have to leave it there because I've got to go to a break in just a while. But thank you so much. So many important issues. Sandra's saying that high school uniform cost £200 in the 1950s. How much have you spent on your children's school uniform? And this element I was just bringing up about how poverty affects hygiene. There is an issue for hygiene poverty, and many food banks are finding that it's things like tampons, deodorants, hair, shampoo, all those sorts of things which families really, really need. And if you can't afford them and your children are going to school and being teased for being smelly, you all know what teenagers are like, how that impacts them for the rest of their lives, being subjected to that sort of bullying, which has basically come from not having enough money. Lots to talk about. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Welcome back. The time is 12:44, which means I've only got 16 minutes left of this show before I hand over to Trisha Goddard. We'll be talking to Trisha a little bit later about what she's got coming up in her show. And it's such beautiful weather. I hope it is wherever you are, but I think there's a lot of sunshine out there today. Many people turning their minds to summer holidays. We're getting towards the end of exam season. I've just been talking about exams with Sandra and Stephanie before her, how kids are doing their GCSEs and A-levels, and then, of course, schools will break up for the summer and we will all start to think about whether we can afford to go on holiday. That's a whole nother issue, of course, in the cost of living crisis. But if we are going on holiday, are we actually going to get there? Constantly seeing, aren't we, at the moment, the photographs from airports of queues, cancellations happening. I was with a friend yesterday who's had a flight cancelled and rebooked 19 times already, which is absolutely crazy, and that's obviously not a unique situation. Flights being cancelled left, right and centre, people worrying about whether they're going to get away, train strikes coming, strikes on the railways coming, lots and lots of problems for people who want to go away. Well, we're going to get some good advice now. I'm so pleased to say that Lisa Francesca Nand is on the line, travel journalist and host of the Big Travel podcast. Very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Should people be panicking about their summer holiday plans, or do you think in a few weeks' time what we're seeing at the moment is going to die down?
I don't think we should be panicking. My old worry, I'm going away like everyone else. And of course, there have been these, terrible problems with staff shortage. Delays and cancellations are happening, and they are happening sometimes last minute. But if you look at it, the vast majority of people are going away, no problem, and coming back as well. I mean, it's obviously hideous when it's your flight that's delayed or cancelled, but the vast majority of people are going away. So I'm not cancelling mine, and I'm very much looking forward to going to Spain, hopefully without mishap in August.
Oh, well, I'm also going to Spain, but I'm driving, so I've decided I'm not to, partly because we want to take the dog with us, but I'm not prepared to risk airports. Now, of course, not everybody can do that. Not everybody has a car or wants to drive or can drive wherever they're going. Is there anything that people can do now, Lisa, to mitigate the potential problems that might be coming down the line? Because certainly some of what I've been reading, some commentators saying the situation isn't going to get better in the airports, that those airlines or airports just can't find the staff. We've been talking about this with other stories today. There is a staff shortage, but there's a particular staff shortage within transport and the airline industry. Many people were furloughed when there was no flying allowed, and a lot of people, those furloughed people, haven't come back. The new staff are having to be trained up and get their security clearance, which is taking quite a long time. But as I said, many people saying the problem is still going to be here over the summer.
We were talking about this back in Easter when we had the same problems. Of course, we had the school holidays and the bank holiday at the same time as Easter happens. And also we had that, a couple of weeks ago with half term and people trying to get away for the Jubilee and everything. And we were hoping that it'd be fixed by then. And we're now hoping that it'll be fixed by the summer season. People are starting to go already. Then the schools break up at the end of July, and that's when it starts to get really busy. The one thing I would say is take heart that the airlines and the aviation industry do really do not want this to be happening. It's costing them an absolute fortune, not just because they have to pay compensation. Don't forget to apply for compensation if your flight is cancelled. But they've also got to get you onto another flight, whether that's with them or with someone else. So it's costing them an absolute fortune, and they are working as hard as possible. After everything they've been through the pandemic, I do have some sympathy, and they will be working as hard as possible to make sure that this is, fingers crossed, fixed by the summer.
But who do you blame for the problem? Because obviously we've seen the government squarely blaming the airlines and the airports and saying they should have seen this coming, they should have made contingencies, they should have found staff to fill those vacancies. And then the airlines seem to be saying the government isn't helping us enough.
Yeah, there's this whole spat going on, and to be honest, the staff shortages, people left during the pandemic, people either made redundant or they've left voluntarily. I don't know about you, but I've encountered a BA pilot who's now doing gardens, someone who's doing, a Virgin guy who's doing deliveries and seem to be happier doing that. But the blame game, I think, isn't really helpful at this point. It's like, how can we fix it? And also, as a consumer, we don't really care how it happened. Just get it sorted out so we can get on our holidays. But, like I said, on the flip side, the vast majority of people are going away, and just, it is awful when it's your flight that's cancelled. Really disruptive. People look forward to their holidays. It's an emotional issue as well, booking and planning a holiday, isn't it? And the airlines will want to fix this as soon as possible, because not only is it costing them so much money, but in terms of consumer confidence going forward, I know loads of people anecdotally these days is not just people talking to me, it's people I see see online, it's a vast number of people saying, oh, I'm not going to bother, I'm not going to risk it. And that is really, really dangerous for the industry and also unnecessary. Go ahead, take your holiday, and hopefully it will go ahead.
Hopefully. I have to say, I did laugh. One of the solutions that British Airways had come up with in this effort to recruit extra staff, because they have so many vacancies, was to stop the ban on people with tattoos being able to be, airline staff or, on the actual plane, so hostesses or, during the flight. And I thought, how very old-fashioned that they even had that ban in the first place.
Oh, did you remember there was all sorts of people, like people wearing, religious things like crucifixes?
I remember that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in the news, and like half of it, I just don't know whether to believe it or not, and it's very, very difficult to get a straight answer. But yeah, apparently the tattoos thing was a thing. And also with the EU, apparently we had 30% of people being employed in aviation were EU citizens previously. So we've obviously, lost it through Brexit as well. So the pandemic, on top of that, those people have gone. But yeah, hopefully they're letting the tattooed people. I'd like to see a security guy with a full face tattoo. I think it'd be quite eclectic.
And Lisa, what are the big trends this summer as far as where people are going? I mean, obviously you've just mentioned that some people are too worried about all this chaos at airports and perhaps doing staycations. Staycation was clearly the big thing during the pandemic. But what about now? Are people more adventurous?
And I don't think so. I think people are going back to their old favourites. I mean, the borders closed during the last couple of years meant that we missed out on all those firm favourites. And people don't always travel just for holidays. I mean, to me, holidays are, really important if you can afford them and get away. But a lot of people have friends and family abroad, don't they? It's not just about the holidays. Or they go back to their favourite resorts in mainly Spain and France and Greece and Italy. Those are our top favourites. And, of course, now we've got the restrictions lifted to the States. We now don't have to do a PCR test to go to the States. So that means there's a flurry of booking for the States as well. So, I just think it's a really lovely time to travel. We've had a really hideous couple of years. It was awful having the borders closed. And, take heart that the industry are trying to do everything they can. And, hopefully we'll all go away on our holidays if we can afford to. That's
exactly. And you mentioned the lifting of the testing regime for the States. Which countries still have the PCR or that you still have to do tests before you fly?
Oh, that's a very good point, and you've put me on the spot. We're fine now in the US. No, it's fine. But no, as a travel expert, even when I go places, I have to sit and, make sure, and I would say that to everyone, make sure that, wherever you're going, because every country was doing something different. Yeah. And that was something that was really fascinating during the pandemic, is everyone, even the EU countries, which we thought was like one big mass and they couldn't make their own decisions, even them, they had different, testing and different requirements. Italy was different for Spain, from Greece, for example. So that is the very important thing. If you are traveling somewhere, make sure you check what their requirements are. Also check your passport date and keep checking your flight as well. It's all about the checking these days. And I think we've forgotten how to travel as well a little bit. It's a bit overwhelming. Going to the airport is bad enough, at normal times, let alone with talk of all these, restrictions and things like that.
And of course, the chaos at the passport office and people not being able to renew their passports in time to go away. So you're absolutely right. If you haven't checked your passport yet, you probably left it too late for this year if your passport is about to run out. Is it 6 months you have to have left on your passport in order to get into most...
Oh, sorry. It's actually only 3 months for the EU, but some overzealous airline staff and security guards were actually turning people back for the 6 months. But it gets complicated because it depends on the date it was issued. And 10 years ago or so, very nicely, I think, here in the UK, we were saying you can have 10 years and 3 months because your passport doesn't run out until 3 months after your 10 years. It's really complicated, but it's from the date the passport started. So look at that date as well, because you might not have a 10-year passport, depending when you applied. You might have 10 years and 3 months or 10 years and 9 months. And it's those extra bits that are the problem for the other countries.
And
does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And of course, children only have 5-year passports anyway, don't they? So that's something you need to keep on top of theirs much more. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. And also, of course, I hope you get to Spain okay. I'm hoping that I'll get to Spain okay. And of course, I've now got to sort out the wretched dog passport, because I'm afraid one of the downsides of Brexit is that the pet passport scheme is no longer in place. So poor old Sparky had to have some extra rabies jab jabs this week and all the rest of it, and poor old me having to pay for that, for those extra vet bills. Anyway, coming up in just a few minutes is the lovely Trisha Goddard, who joins me now.
Hi, Daisy. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you? What have you got on your show?
Well, let me just tell you, just before I came on air, I tested positive for COVID. So.
No, how are you feeling?
Absolutely vile. But I'm going to crack on.
You poor thing.
We're looking at... No. Listen, it sounds awful, but, you know, when I was in bed this morning and I just I can't get out of bed, I told myself, you know, when I went through chemotherapy for my breast cancer, I worked all the way through. I said, come on, Goddard, you lazy thing, get up. So I dosed myself up. I'm here. I'm lucky I can work from home. Very lucky I can work from home here in Connecticut. Just quickly, we're looking at all those, if you've walked down Oxford Street recently, those sugary shops, you know, those massive American sugar shops, they're break rules and they're trying to entice kids in. So we look at that. We've got our faith panel where we look at the news through the eyes of the clergy. We've got our doctor in the house, and we've got our mental health. Look at mental health. So we like to look at the news through different eyes, and that's what we'll be doing.
Well, that sounds fantastic, Trisha, and I'm so sorry to hear that you've got COVID. As you said, thank goodness for working from home on this occasion, but I hope you've got